Batu, Marana, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
My God, it's full of stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. We're at the end of the season. We're here for the wrap-up and final review. I'm very excited to see how we are coming with our scores and, like, you know, those sorts of... Any final thoughts we're going to have on these films in retrospect and in reflection. So, yeah, I kind of enjoy these episodes. Sometimes we get to... look back at what we've seen. It reminds me, because I look at the list, I'm like, oh yeah, shit, we watched that was part of this list. Feels so long ago.
Yeah, no, it does. And especially we did the 50s as sort of beginning the season, and then we have 12 to round out the season. And yeah, that's quite a long list to sort of go back and think, okay, well, I guess that's like 24 weeks or so.
Yeah, that's like over 6 months worth of sort of of films that we've had to think about and come on in retrospect. I mean, I'll give a quick list. We've already given the wrap up in our review of the 50s one, and go back and have a look at that. That was a completely different sort of block. But I'll just give a rundown of this. We did Eyes Without a Face, The Man Who Fell to Earth, Star Trek The Motion Picture, Buckaroo Banzai, Little Shop of Horrors, Demolition Man, Strange Days, Event Horizon, Gattaca, Open Your Eyes, Vanilla Sky, and The Fountain. So that is a really diverse list, really, when you go back and look at it. You're like, yeah, that it's not, one type of sci-fi. That covers all sort of bases there. So it's been really good.
And I'm really proud that we have, we have a British film with The Man Who Fell to Earth. We have a French film with Eyes Without a Face.
Yeah.
We have a Spanish film with Open Your Eyes, and an American reinterpretation of it. I'm quite pleased with the diversity, and also, like, we've got one from the 60s, two from the 70s, two from our favorite decade, the 80s.
Yeah.
And, we actually have three from 1997, Event Horizon, Gattaca, and Open Your Eyes.
I was going to say that, like, 97 became a bit of a focal point towards the end. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say is this is probably the first, we did got, well, no, we haven't done it for a while, but this is the first season where we haven't had a Japanese entry. So, but yeah, no, it's good to see we're getting other diversity. Like you say, sort of French and Spanish and British. So yeah, we've had, the 50s was quite British. We had a lot of Quatermass, so it's sort of like, great representation.
And we'll have more Japanese stuff.
I
also like having something animated in there. And this was the first season where we didn't have something animated, but we'll get back to that. I do think that this season was defined by stuff that we hadn't seen more than previous seasons. And, kind of giving us the joy of forcing ourselves to watch some of these movies, some of which we've wanted to watch for a long time, we've heard about, and being able to then springboard out of that and discuss it with, my buddy and talk about what is this.
Yeah, there was definitely a couple on this list where I was like, there's two where I was like, I can't wait for him to see this. One of them paid off, the other one less so. But yeah, there's been a couple as well that, like, completely new to me that I'm just really glad, they were a new experience really to watch. So I think should we start from the beginning? Should we start with Eyes Without a Face? Black and white French, sort of almost like noir sci-fi horror. Obviously, go back to the episode. Listen to the whole episode for all of our discussions. But this was a bit of a belter to start the season with, and I'd not seen it before. Not when I was really sort of fully aware of.
Yeah, nor had I. But it's one of those films that shows I'm a big fan of, obviously, French literature and French movies and stuff, and but I have holes in my knowledge, and this is one of those that shows up on every list of like best European sci-fi, best French sci-fi, and so I'm glad to have seen it.
Oh yeah, no, I really enjoyed this, and I was, the thing we sort of focus on is sort of how different it was to the sci-fi and stuff of the period. Like this was brutally like frank about some of its content. The facial surgery that as I sort of said, as watching it, I'm like, oh, this will cut in a minute. Or this will cut in a second. All right, I want that, but it'll cut in a second. And it doesn't. It just keeps going. And you're just like, oh my God, like this is what they're doing.
Well, you and I are fans of like RoboCop and especially the violence of the 80s. So, maybe this was a spiritual influence.
It definitely felt it. I mean, the thing is, like you say, the comparison, that you and I sort of made, I think at the time, was Psycho. And in that, they're like, oh my God, yeah, there's so much implied, it's scary. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's nothing implied in some of this. Like, some of this is just like, and it holds you there. And that's the point of how sort of like, what this is. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, the other thing I liked about this is it's so stylish. I'm such a sucker for it. It's black and white, but it's so stylish, whether they're out on the town and they're sort of scouting for new victims, or they're inside that castle, and it's like that could easily be a sort of silly Frankenstein's lair thing, and instead it feels so evocative and stylish in a really good way.
Yeah, all the sets in this were really good. Like it was one of those, I say, one of the things I've been thinking about recently, watching a couple of films, is like set designers and set dressers and the job that they do. And I don't think it's something we've ever mentioned. It's sort of, but like even going back to these films, like it can make or break a scene, because like, the actors can be fine, if that's gonna be great, and then if the sets look a bit cheap or naff or wrong, or but it can really sort of take you out. But this is, like I say, his had a great sort of solid tone throughout, and like the sets were fantastic. Like the hospital as well, where the guy works, it just looks. It looked like a hospital, but there has that edge. Everything in this has like a bit of an edge to it that is really cool.
Yeah, this does kind of get me into, if I have, it's not exactly a complaint, but if I have one sort of observation, is I always have this kind of voice in the back of my head saying, is this science fiction? Like, is this sci-fi enough? And obviously, like we did the 50s block, like The Tingler is closer to horror than it is sci-fi, but it's technically sci-fi, right? It meets the requirement. Eyes Without a Face is sci-fi, but it's really sci-fi because it's got facial transplant in 1960, which is cool. But I mean, there are these discussions of like I've had passionate discussions online about like, is Dr. Strangelove sci-fi? Like it's in an alt parallel timeline, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's sci-fi, but I mean, there are these arguments, and I think The Fountain, plays into that too, where it's fun that we're sort of branching out and touching on these little eddies of sci-fi history.
Yeah, I think, maybe not fair, we've talked about it, but this idea that you have like a pool, haven't you? At the very center of the pool is that sort of like those sort of films or literature or content that is pure science fiction. Science fiction in its truest form, and that's sort of like that's where you find like Asimov and those kinds of sort of like
Clark and
that's it. Yeah, those real sort of like where they're sort of like they're taking ideas and really sort of like extending them using these sci-fi concepts. And then as you get out from that, you start to sort of that's when you get to sort of the Hollywoodization and things, and then eventually you get to the edges where you do in this. There's art and stuff throughout all this, but then you get to the edges where, like you say, you get things like Eyes Without a Face or The Fountain and stuff, and it's a bit more. It has sci-fi elements, or it has a sci-fi concept, but then there's, like you say, there's leanings into horror or comedy or drama or thriller or whatever. But yeah, this feels, for 1960, this is definitely sort of like a medical science fiction, isn't it? This is It is, but it uses it for those sorts of gothic trappings as well. Which again, like you say, the stylings and even the concept is sort, a formerly beautiful woman trapped in a castle who's sort of hidden behind a mask.
Yeah, and I really dig that. And I mean, you and we also like smaller stories, right? I mean, I think so many of the best like Star Trek episodes are just an implication of the teleporter, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's the famous Picard's flute episode, where it's like, yeah, it's all in a sort of simulation, but it's really just about living an alternate life, and that's great, and it's such a fantastic episode. Doesn't need any spaceships, doesn't but that's clearly science fiction. Yeah, and then you have those overlaps where obviously the best example is like Alien, where you get this infusion of science fiction from another genre, and this feels like like you said, sort of gothic and moody, Frenchy 1960s, almost like it's got some sort of like almost French New Wave moments in it, as just sort of watching the people and people who don't fit into society.
Well, one of the things I would say before we sort of come to the score is to that point is this is one of those films that if you were to really do some sort of ancestry.com kind of thing for films, if you were to take sort of like for especially French cinema or science fiction cinema or like you would track if you track back through that parentage and through those influences, I can imagine this cropping up on quite a few where like there's directors that are like, oh no, yeah, that was a real influence on me, from like say from the style to the idea to whatever.
Yeah, and we talked about that in the episode of just sort of like it's one of these movies that sort of nobody sees, but once you see it, you're like, oh, that's where all that shit came from.
yeah. Well, it's one of the, it's that thing, and that again, the cliche to say it of like when you watch an older thing and you go, oh, it's loaded with cliches. Well, no, that's where the cliches came from,
right? And
everyone's copied since, and that sort of becomes a bit of a problem. We said the same with John Carter, that sort of thing. You go back and you go, oh yeah, but this is just the same as, and you go, well, no, that is the same as this. Let's be clear.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And John Carter's been incredibly influential, and that was part of the problem of that movie was, it came out at the point where people are like, yeah, this is all cliches. Well,
yeah. Let's have this discussion about influences, shall we? Okay, so let's talk about scores. So if you want to go first. Yeah, okay, I'll go first. Happy to go first. So I gave it a 7.5.
Oh, I gave it a 7.
Okay.
Yeah, so very close. Yeah, so why did you go 0.5?
It nudged up because it was so different to things other things I'd seen. I think that's going to sort of, there's a similar motif for the next one as well, but it's one of those, it stuck with me visually. Like, the plot itself is very simple, like, but it was the sort of there were certain moments visually, like the operation, the fact that the police conducting the investigation get like, basically their result is not what you're expecting, sort of like get sort of that gets turned around, and also just the ending, like of her just wandering off. It's not that resolution. This film doesn't give you those resolutions that you're expecting, and it sat with me for quite a long time because of that. So I notched it up into that thing of like, yeah, this is actually something that's really interesting. So it was just those little things, really.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think that when I look back on it, I think I love this movie. It's an awesome movie. I like, virtually every shot and every decision the movie makes. Having said that, I don't know what it adds up to. It sort of feels like this is a great movie, but what does it really have to say? It doesn't wear its sort of like Frankenstein point of like, don't meddle with nature, don't go too far. It doesn't wear that on. So you don't leave this movie thinking like, right, well, we should never transplant faces. Like that's not, important. but it is a sort of stylish manifesto.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's interesting to sort of say, to start with this and to end with The Fountain, one of the things we talked about quite heavily in The Fountain was this idea of poetry, visual poetry. And watching The Fountain made me think of Eyes Without a Face. And again, I mentioned like in The Man Who Fell to Earth. This idea of these films, not the plot is one thing, it seems quite thin really for Eyes Without a Face, but there's a visual language with this film that sort of like, that sort of, maybe it comes, this will fall away as my sort of my cinema experience, my learnings grow and expand, because I'm like, wow, it doesn't feel like a Michael Bay film. Like, no, it feels like something very, very different. and I kind of like that I'm experiencing that. So yeah, you're right, it doesn't sort of amount to a great deal, but then like, I don't think it's supposed to. You know what I mean? It's that thing, you can interpret it different ways. Talking about films that may or may not amount to a great deal, the next film, The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Well, this was, it's interesting that, I also think of what films you chose or I chose or were mutual picks or whatever. And we're always so accommodating, and we're both, we love each other and love doing this, and we love sci-fi. So, it's not hard to sell us on something. But, I chose Eyes Without a Face, so I'm extra happy that you went higher than me. Yeah. The Man Who Fell to Earth is one that you chose, and I just fell in love with it. And I remember watching it and thinking that first like 20 minutes or so is sort of like, what the hell am I watching? Yeah. But then you get into it, and it has just stuck with me. And even the sort of like trashy, cheap shots of the planet that he's from, where all you see is his family and this little like mobile home on a monorail going through the desert, and it rocks back and forth like it looks cheap, but it's all put through a filter, so it's fine, and it conveys the message. Is also a memory, presumably, so maybe that's it's distorted through that process. The strangeness of it, the way that it sticks with me, the way that it just goes on and on and on, and has like another chapter, and never does it wear this is a sci-fi film on its sleeve, right? It's never, I'm an alien, and instead that's used for these quiet moments of like the horror of his girlfriend, and things like this, and the distortion of history. And the fact that none of it really amounts to anything in terms of transforming the history of Earth, and yet it feels as if something has really happened. I love it.
Yeah, no, I am a big fan of this film in a similar way to the first film. Like, it's a new sort of kind of film to watch. And again, it's one of those films that sort of doesn't meet... No, it doesn't meet you. It sort of it says, "Oh no, we are going to be this, and you've got to come along." And
it
again,
insists upon itself.
Yeah, it very much does. And when you think you sort of literally when you think you're getting a handle of what this film is or is supposed to be, it'll be like, "Oh, I'm over here now," and you're just like, "Oh shit, I better keep up." Like there's something, or at least I can't keep up, and you have to rewind and go like, "Right, there was a shift there, and I'm not sure what that is. Like, is there a time scale on this, or which, as we said in the film, like there's clearly a time scale to this film, and it's not well defined. You have to sort of be really watch for how characters change and the things that are going on." But it does become ingrained in you. And again, for those like weirdly like intimate moments of with Bowie's alien, when he does present himself to his girlfriend and she's horrified, like that reaction that she has is brilliant. But also when they do go to sleep together, they go to make love, and his reference point is to exude this goo, and she sort of feels it, and she's just like, "What is this?" And it goes, because she's tried to break that barrier, and then she's like repulsed again, and all those sort of things. And then the whole thing at the end where he's sort of a prisoner, but he's not a prisoner because he's able to walk out at the end. And what does it mean? And the fact that at the end of this, much like with Eyes Without a Face, like you get to the end and you're like, "Oh, yeah, this didn't really get resolved. Like, he didn't save his family. Like you said, he hasn't sort of come and become this sort of messiah for the Earth. Like, it hasn't really worked. Like, you know, the Earth has, like, being on Earth has sort of beaten him. Like, he's become an alcoholic. You know, it starts with him drinking water from a river, like this pure thing, and then it ends with him drinking like a martini out of a glass in some shitty bar, and you're just like, yeah, this film has got so much going on, but then, like you say, it's another one where you sort of think, is it too much?
Yeah,
They layer on too much weirdness.
I mean, you've talked a lot about how it's got that sort of flashback.
Yeah.
To, you know, what is it that he's seeing?
Some pilgrims in a field.
Some pilgrims, and it's like, okay, is this a power that he has? You know, is he actually there? Is he seeing it? It doesn't matter. And I think that if there is a problem with this film, it's that kind of thing. It's like,
yes,
you know, like you have to do a lot of work to figure out or try to make sense of certain things that you're presented with. Another example is that obviously they have space flight technology. He is captured, and there's a sort of corporate coup before that's able to happen. But this is, you know, in the press, there's crowds. What happened with that? How did that change Earth technology? I mean, you know, that's not really important. Why was he, like, the guards aren't guarding him anymore when he escapes? What happened there? You kind of have to make sense of these moments. I would just say that, you know, I think that's a downside of this, but they feel right. And I think that there's virtually no scene. I love the ending, and I'll come back to that. But, you know, there's virtually no scene, including like when he has sex with her again and they use the gun, and it's like, you know, it's bizarre.
God, yeah.
But it feels right. And I love this idea of, like, you know, yeah, of course, an alien is not going to select a sexual partner based on the things that we would, right? You know, it's just like, right, I'm aloof, and, you know, you're good enough, and but then sort of has feelings for her. So, I mean, there's so much that I really love about this, and even the stuff that bothers me, or that I have to do more work than I should, or I'm not sure that they really had an answer for, still makes amazing scenes that feel right, despite the fact that I'm not sure they are.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. I agree that they feel right, but you also make a really good point of they don't have answers for. They present you with things that, like, they clearly don't have an answer for, and that does bug me. And that sort of brought down the score a bit, because I do go back and I'm like, that thing with it's this thing of, like, you know, if you're going to present me something, I don't always need a payoff, but I need at least some reason for it to be there. And that thing with the pilgrims is like, I don't know what this was for. Like, it doesn't seem to pay off in any way. Like, you know, because you see it from both perspectives. Like, you see him seeing them, and they see the car, and you're like, okay, wow, so there's something going on here. Nope, doesn't matter. Never sort of comes up again. It's completely irrelevant. It's clearly a message for something, but I don't get it. And again, that last sort of 10 minutes, or maybe it's more than 10, 15 minutes, where he's in that room, and then he finds out he's free to go and stuff. There's parts of that are great, like, say, when she comes in and they have that sort of reconnection, and it's really bizarre. But then you're still like, well, what's going on? Like, I don't understand how this all sort of comes together. And so there's sort of the lack of resolution for some of the story threads does bother me. But it's what sort of intrigues me as well. You know, sort of makes you go back and go, what's important and what isn't. There's the other couple when his partner and his other, well, he's literally his business partner and the woman he chose, and they become a couple. And so you're like, okay, well, that sort of makes sense, because they've had this similar life experience, and that's what they're connecting over. And then there's that thing of, like, it just keeps going. You're like, okay, we're going to get some of this, and then you get, like, it's sort of, I don't know, it's good, but, like, and I love some of this film. I absolutely adore some of this film, but there's still this element where I'm like, there's something chipping away at me a little bit.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the idea that, yes, it goes on, but some of it can feel a little random. It can feel like, I mean, this is going to sound unnecessarily condemnatory, but sort of like, you know, adolescent writing. where it's
Mm.
like, right, and why have you made those choices? I don't know. They just, it's like, okay, that would seem to suggest this. Yeah, and like that hasn't been thought of. I mean, there is something of that.
That's yes. There's definitely some of that going on, and I agree with that. Adolescent writing seems to be the thing of like, I had this cool idea because I saw something out of the window. Great. How is that going to translate into a story element? Oh, it's not. It's just I saw this cool bit. And again, I get that there's like a visual poetry to this film. This is another one where it's like, this film is telling you things through the visuals. Sort of. There's weird scenes that when, again, flashing back to his home world, and then sort of like the gradual realization that they're dead, and this sort of thing. All that is, again, like you said, it sort of looks cheap, but like it works. All that sort of stuff works for me, because especially as it gets gradually worse for them, and how, like, is that in his head? Is that his sort of expectation? Is that what his fear? Like, all that's really good. But there's other elements that I'm just like, you're just tainting this that little bit. But yeah,
I
still,
agree.
Still a very good film.
I want to say about the ending, I am so sick of Hollywood endings. I mean, sometimes it works, and I'm not against it. Obviously, I'm used to it. I love, success story. But, I'm so sick of situations in which, like, characters here, right, nobody's escaped from this trap before. Yeah, but you're the protagonist, and we've written this story about you, so obviously you're gonna be the one to escape, and it's gonna be relatively simple, where you're like, why didn't anyone else do this? This sense of like this alien civilization needing, resources and sending people out, and understanding the odds of success are very slight. And that, of course, he's not the exception. And it's really sad, but it doesn't play the violins and, hold a close up on the wife's face or something as the violins swell. No, he's just drunk and, and seems resigned to the fact that, yeah, I wasn't the exception,
Yeah. And I do like that ending when he meets him in that bar, and there is that resignation of like, no, I failed, and there's nothing more I can do, and it does leave ambiguity, because you said, like, I took it, like, I can't remember if he looks up or looks down at him, but like that final shot, like, you can take it, he died, that you can read it in that way, or you can read it as just sort of like, this is it now. That moment is just him resigned to being here for as long as it takes. But it ends on a down note. Let's not kid ourselves.
Well, so I'll go first with the rating. I think this is gonna shock you. I gave it a 9.
Oh wow! Okay.
I think this is sublime. It has flaws. It is not a perfect movie. It's definitely not a 10. But I think it's sublime. I think even if its mistakes are fascinating, and it manages to, it has that rare quality that I think 9s have for me, of it seems to transcend its problems. It feels like it's about more and imbued with meaning, even in its mistakes.
Yeah, no, I can see what you mean. Like, it all makes a whole. I actually give it a 7.5 for the same thing. Like, this is going into really good. Like, this is that territory of like, this is a really good film, but like, it's for me, like you said, it says something, but it's that ability for repeat viewing. Could I sit down and watch this? Yeah, I will. I know I will. Not for some time. And so it doesn't have that it doesn't re-invite me to go back at times, like some of these other films will. But it's still really good. I think it's a really strong film. It's just, like I say, there was just certain things where I'm like, as I reflect on it and you go back on it, and as I responded to then, I was like, it has issues. But there's moments I love in this film. Absolutely, like I said, stick with you.
Oh, I agree with that. I think the only film that I've previously given a 9 to is Forbidden Planet. And that and this are both reference points for me. They're both things that I will think of. I will want other movies to be as interesting and good as I, marvel at those films. I do think that if I watched this again and again, it would tend to go down, and those things that annoy that we're talking about that are flaws would become more annoying
obvious.
to me.
Yeah. But I agree. I definitely can see why this is so appealing. And it's the thing is, we opened up the season now with 2 films that I would definitely recommend. The sort of if you haven't seen these films and you like science fiction films, try these films out. You may hate them, but they are worth the experience. I think that's sort of the point.
I'm into that. Well, the next one is very different. Star Trek: The Motion Picture. This is the V'ger. This is the slow. One. I mean, of all the Star Trek movies of the original cast, this is the one that feels most like an episode, and it feels like a '70s reinterpretation of the thoughtfulness of the original show, of the best episodes of the original show, that take an idea and tease it out. And this is going to do that same thing, but, take its time, be infused with that sort of 70s motion picture science fiction aesthetic and pacing. And I love this. I think it works.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a good film. You say about the pacing and stuff, and again, I think it's good. It's one of those that you do when you watch it. There's moments where you're like, this doesn't need to be as long, or get to the point. So the ship porn at the beginning of Scotty and Kirk flying around the Enterprise, and you're just sort of looking at your watch and going, I get why they did it in the day, because from a special effects point of view, it's the returning to the ship, but you're still a bit like, yeah, we get it. It's the Enterprise. I get it. Let's crack on with this.
See, I totally disagree with you. I love the length of that sequence. I mean, I wouldn't mind if it were shorter, but I don't mind the length it is. And it has that ability of long sequences, whether it's in like 2001 or Interstellar, where I get past my frustration, because I am the most impatient guy in the world. I get past my frustration, and my brain goes to a different place. Instead of just getting angry and saying like, oh my God, get on with it, my brain goes to, oh, that's interesting, and I lose myself in the visual poetry of like, they love the Enterprise, and don't I love the Enterprise? And it's a love poem to the Enterprise, and I feel it so much.
It does. It just feels a little gratuitous after so long. I'm just like, all right, let's move on. However, this film, other parts of this film, and they said this, there are parts of this film that are slow and protracted, and you go, okay, speed this up. And there's other bits when you're like, that feels incredibly crammed together. And but then it has other moments I think are fantastic. Like the moments I often think about are, there's the transporter issue when they have the fatality in the transporter, which I really I say I love that, but I find that fascinating that they're actually introducing that that's an issue. There's later on sort of the meeting, the reintroduction of Spock with McCoy and Kirk, and there's that sort of scene in the quarters, which I really like. Yet there's also the relationship between, well, yeah, knack of the characters now. The captain,
and
Decker. Yeah, when you're sort of like, this feels like this needs to be explored quite a lot more in order for the end to have the weight that they think it has, or it should have. And so I think that lets it down when you get to the sort of the third act, and you have this sort of, and I like the ending, and the fact it's not a big boom boom punchy punchy kind of ending. I appreciate that, but they try to give it some weight and some sort of like this metaphysical idea, but you haven't got the drama or the sort of the time spent with the characters behind it for it to have the weight that they clearly want it to have. And I think that sort of lets it down quite heavily.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that the epitome for me of the time waste is the whole wormhole sequence of, like how many times have we seen the Enterprise leaving the solar system or other ships? This is something that it strikes me that sequence was put in there. Maybe it was to get some special effects and have some drama because it's a slow script. But it seems to me that was probably something. I mean, the scripts are available for the original 2-episode in the image, and I haven't read them. But that strikes me as something that could have been added in order to help pad it out.
Yeah.
And yet it's totally unnecessary and slows down the story. And as you say, I mean, like, Decker's a fascinating character. There should be more with that. Spock, there should be more with him sort of having gone through Kolinahr. Ilya is a fascinating character. I want to, today there would be an HBO Max or Paramount Plus Ilya series. Like, I want that. That would be fantastic. So I think you're right that there are these things that are included that feel unnecessary or even a strange choice to focus on. And then other things that are obvious choices that would really enhance the film and be fascinating and sort of can't miss scenes that they just ignore.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's other scenes as well, like later on when they enter Fiji with the Enterprise. And you're like, oh, the model work on this is amazing. It tells you the scope of how big this thing is. And yet I'm still going like, and maybe this is a real patronization, but like sophistication of audiences. Maybe, this is sort of 40 years on. We're like, oh, we get this. I don't need this level of information to tell me how vast this thing is, because it keeps going. Because I'm like, this is time you could have spent with other characters giving us information or giving us that relationship that would have been a lot more interesting. And so yeah, it does. That's the problem with it. It's sort of it's the length of time it takes for the pacing isn't a problem, because I don't mind it being slow. I don't mind it being sort of like talky and all that kind of stuff. As long as that sort of pays off, the talking pays off and gives us some more. And I think they sort of center on some of the wrong bits.
Yeah, it's sort of the less the pacing and more the choices.
Yes.
And some of those choices are great. I like that slow sequence of going into V'ger. I mean, I might make some modifications with current CGI, but it did occur to me that, you brought up in discussing it that we never get the exterior shots of V'ger. And we really don't have, for all of those ponderous long scenes, we really don't have a good sense of place. And how like, what does this look like over the Earth? It's so enormous. These are no-brainers that really would help that sense of drama. And you pointed out that there's a threat to Earth in this. It doesn't feel like it.
That was what I was going to say. My next point was going to be the stakes, as you say about the vast sort of size of this thing, because they talk about it sort of like entering the solar system, and it's so huge. It's sort of like, it's shadowing Jupiter or whatever. Okay, this thing is absolutely gargantuan. Like, this thing is, a real presence. Okay, well, something that big is going to start having an impact on like gravity and weather systems and all this other stuff. It's going to start messing things up. And it does. It says it's got like a countdown because it's trying to get to Earth, to get to the Creator. And you never go back to Earth to see this tension of like, we are relying on the Enterprise to stop this thing. It's destroying the Earth. Or this thing is, okay, like this is, and
where's Michael Bay when you need him? He would give us a shot looking up at the sky and you see Cybertron. And
I want to.
This makes no sense, but I feel a sense of stake.
I want to see meteorites coming crashing down in Paris to tell me how dangerous this is. If I don't have that, I don't understand it.
I want to see the smashing through satellites and the International Space Station.
Exactly.
Yeah. But
something, maybe not a Bay-esque sort of presentation, but something that just says, oh no, people on Earth are worried. Like, this is, and there's cliches, like we've lost contact with the Enterprise or something, I don't know. But like, the stakes, sort of, you completely forget by the end of this film that, oh yeah, shit, the Earth's at stake.
Yes.
Like, and then you get to the end and they're like, we've witnessed the creation of a new species. And you go, wow, that's fascinating. Is it going to stop trying to kill Earth?
Yeah, there are billions of people down below who are like, right, are we safe now?
Yeah.
But I think that for a movie, it wouldn't take that much to give this a sense of stakes and give this, a little bit more of that Hollywood blockbuster, feel to it. without taking away the intellectualism of this film. And this film is, I think, hated and loved as this sort of like slow intellectual exercise. It's about things, you know, which sometimes the Star Trek movies are criticized for failing to be.
Mm.
But, you know, and it's not just make it a little more Hollywood. It's tell the story that you have already told about a threat to Earth better. And I think you made that point well. So what was your rating?
So my score was 6.5.
Exactly what I have.
Yeah, because I do like this film and I will go back and watch it, but I recognise that it's not the best Star Trek film. And we will cover more Trek, don't worry. We will get to some others. And there are worse Treks. Because Shatner got to go behind the screens. What about you? So you get this 6.5 as well, you say?
Yeah, for me, that's the perfect rating. You know, I could see a 7, but 7 is being a little generous. You know, this is definitely above average. People rate it too low, but it does have those flaws.
Yeah, definitely. Right, so going from Star Trek to Buckaroo Banzai. And I think we're going to be quite far as we were on the episode on the scoring. So what are your thoughts then, going back and reflecting on this?
This has not improved in my memory. I didn't like it when we reviewed it. And I mean, I love your arguments. I love, you know, there's a version of this movie that would work for me. This is not that version. Weller is just the wrong person for it to begin with. You know, I mean, it's a better script than, you know, like Earth Girls Are Easy or something, but it doesn't flow and have the, I mean, this is an inferior movie to Earth Girls Are Easy to me.
Both starring with Jeff Goldblum, just to say, but yeah. No, I know what you're saying. And this is one of those weird ones, I think, where I acknowledge its flaws, but like I have so much weird fun with this film, and it's one of those films that I sort of go back to that I'm like, this is one of those ones where like weirdly there are things that like when they add in too many ideas, I sort of either jump off or I jump in, and for some reason with this I jump in. That I'm like, yeah, no, I completely accept. This guy is a surgeon, rock star, adventurer.
Who's beloved and respected by the world. The president calls him for advice.
Who has comics written about him already, has the Hong Kong Cavaliers as his backing group, and he also has like a whole bunch of sort of like the irregulars. It's like all these cliches of the pulp era, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm in on all of it. And it's got this this intergalactic thing, like, you know, and you've got John Lithgow, you know, who appears to be in a different film to Peter Weller. They're in a completely different film. One's in a Mel Brooks film, one's not. And there are times when it works and times when it doesn't. But I get something from this film. Like you say, it's that thing of like swing and a miss. Like I'm like, yeah, you tried for something insanely weird and it didn't quite work, but I do enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are two things here, and we've talked about movies, you know, so many movies on the podcast, and then other movies, you know, off camera, where, you know, so occasionally, usually we agree about what works. Occasionally, you know, something works for one of us and doesn't for the other. And for me, none of this works, or it almost never works, and it just doesn't have that charm. The thing you said about like fun is, you know, in talking about our ratings, and, you know, we have talked about this before off camera, like, how do you accommodate for the fact that it's fun? You know, I think, you know, you can poke a million holes in the plot of, and even what's shown and what's not of Back to the Future, but everything works. And I think that's pretty universally acknowledged. Everything works. That is so much fun. You know, you can poke holes in it, but it's really hard to not forgive those holes because it's just working and it's so much fun. And I feel very comfortable rating that a little higher than I think I maybe should because it's just fun and it's working. But there are movies that I love that I think, all right, how do I accommodate for the fact that I find it so much fun? I mean, Transformers the movie is just so much fun for me, but I know it's got its flaws. How do I flub that score a little, but not too much?
It's funny. I was literally thinking about this today, and there was a couple of films I sort of put out on Twitter. It's like 4 films I know aren't good, but I unashamedly enjoy. And there was other ones like Max Payne, Howard the Duck, Police Academy, and Equilibrium as well. I'm like, oh, I know these films aren't great. Like, I know. I watch these films. I'm like, oh, I know that, but that doesn't work, or like that's silly. But like, there's something about this film that I really dig. I think Buckaroo Banzai comes into that where I sit and like there's moments I'm like, oh yeah, this bit doesn't work. Like this bit makes very little sense, or and I accept like Peter Weller isn't probably the best casting. Sort of like there was someone definitely better for the role, someone more charming and probably a bit more less serious. I think but there's still something about this that sort of just seems to sort of that pulls me in and encourages me to rewatch it. So,
well, and apparently Weller was the same way on the set of RoboCop. That he was, I mean, he has this guru. I knew somebody who knew him in the context of being a professor, and apparently he had a guru then. I mean, to me, it's a bad sign if I could imagine a dramatic character or a dramatic actor being replaced by Adam Sandler, and I think Adam Sandler might have done a better job.
Yeah, in the 80s, I often think like, who would it be? Like, who would have been that 80s sort of? And I think of like SNL cast. Like I think I can see there's someone picking someone like that. Chevy Chase probably would have been a good replacement.
Yeah, sort of classic Fletch. Like
exactly.
I like the Fletch movies. Do Fletch with sci-fi. I'd love to have seen that.
And that's what sort of struck me is like, if they'd have gone with that and they had the money and the clout to do that, I think this would have been a much more interesting film. And there is a better, like I said, this is scraping at being a good film for me, like a really good film. But I can understand why. So let's go to the scores then. Go on, let's get past this.
Okay, well, you won't be happy with this. I gave this a 4.5. So, and this was one where I sort of, in going back, I originally had it at a 5, and I thought, yeah, I've given a 5 to movies that I thought were a lot better than this. I can't. So, in good conscience, I brought it down a point. What did you give it?
I also gave this a 6.5, because it's one of those. I'll say I know. And I was again balancing that fun and that sort of element, and again balancing and looking at and going, I gave the Man Who Fell to Earth 7.5, and that's like there are bits that are legit art. There's very little I can say is legit art in Buckaroo Banzai. So 6.5 sort of felt like a fair sort of score.
Yeah, I could deal with that, and a lot of it is sort of like what works for somebody and doesn't work for somebody else. I love Hudson Hawk, and Hudson Hawk is like my version of this, where it's like there's shit that doesn't work in there, and there's shit that's embarrassing. I still love that movie, and the stuff that's embarrassing, I'm like, yeah, that's really embarrassing, but it still kind of works for me.
That is actually a really good comparison, because that's another film that throws so many ideas at the screen, and you've got people, you've got Bruce Willis sort of trying to be Bruce, and then you've got Richard E. Grant coming in and doing something completely different, and you're like, okay, I'm not sure what this is. I do like that film. That is a good film. Okay, next one. So I'm going to put a bit of a caveat on this next one, because my score is for something specific. So we're going to talk about Little Shop of Horrors, and my score is for the director's cut.
Yes, absolutely. I was going to say the same thing. And you, again, credit where credit's due, my friend. You alerted me to the alternate ending. Mm-hmm. And I think with the original ending, it to my mind, it's at least a 1.5. It is a 1.5 lower than where it is right now.
Yeah, I'd actually agree. I'd say a 1, maybe not 1.5, but maybe around that 1 to 1.5. Yes. This alternate ending, this alternate cut, elevates this film to something so much better.
Yes. And it makes so much come together that is, there's so much in this that is interesting, and it kind of works. There are stronger numbers and there are weaker numbers, and the performances are good. But I mean, there's so much that's sort of teased and threads in this that never wind up coming together in the original version, and with that saccharine ending. And just there's something about, I mean, every second of that ending, with "Don't Feed the Plants." I am such a sucker for audiovisual content. I think all movies, I would love all movies to feel like, to feel like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, like an audiovisual feast.
Yes.
And that ending where, puppetry is being synchronized to the beats of the music, where the music swells and you're watching something that blows your mind, and my mind just, all the neurons are firing, and I am in my happy place and delighted with the intellectual content too.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, the thing is, like you say, one of the things that sort of, we said this in the episode, that has always sort of like played out from when I used to watch this as a kid, because again, I didn't see the alternate version until relatively recently when it was finally released and all spliced in back together. It was like you watch that film as a kid and you go, oh yeah, no, I love the music and I love Audrey too, and you sort of ignore the ending because you just go, oh okay, well he won. Him and Audrey go off, and then you have the little plant in the garden that sort of says, here's the little nod of like it may not be, all green or whatever. And then you watch the director's cut and you sort of go, oh, this is what they wanted. Like, I can see why the studio sort of showed this and were like, oh no, like 80s audiences aren't ready for this. Like, oh no. Having said that, we've literally just talked about 2 of the films with downbeat endings.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they had. And I think this is in that thing. It's not a downbeat ending. It's a great catastrophe ending, because it's. But the other thing I like in this version is the way that Audrey 2 is released. In the original, in the theatrical cut, James Belushi turns up, doesn't he? He's sort of like, I want to buy, sort of thing. And they sort of, that's when he proposes the idea of Audrey 2 being in every house in America. In this version, we see, firstly, you see sort of Rick Moranis gives up Audrey to the plant, and then he finds out that like a cutting of Audrey's already been stolen, and the plans are already in place. Like,
right. And they're like, yeah, we'd like your permission, but we're perfectly willing to take you to court if you want to fight. It's like, that sounds like the corporate America that we know, right?
Yeah, and as you said, it fits in with the satire and everything that you've already seen in the film. Like you say, everything just comes together in a much more cohesive way, and tonally, like that ending works. And it also fits in with this idea that what's the character name? Rick Moranis' character.
Seymour.
You realise that Seymour's not a great guy. Like, you realise that, like, in the theatrical version, they clearly wanted this sort of like, and they lived happily ever after. But like, you've seen the film, and you're like, as we sort of said, like, well, he's a bit of a creep. Like, he's a bit lecherous. He's a bit of a creep. Like, no, we've got to understand that, like, he gives up. She dies, but he still gives up the body of this woman he loves to Audrey too. Like, it's all he's not great.
The other thing about that is that original ending was so ahead of its time. I was going to say, like, it veers into a disaster movie, and it like changes the genre completely, yeah. and but in the most like obvious way, where in retrospect you say, oh right, of course this was going to happen. But we're recording this. This is being released at the beginning of 2022, and we are in an era in which I think we are better equipped to see these nice guy, white, male, cis heroes as more problematic. That they, I mean, the next movie we're going to talk about is Demolition Man. So, I mean, that sort of behavior of just not caring about other people and being creepy, lying to, manipulating the girl. Has she, even really consented if she's had, all of these secrets kept from her? I mean, those are things that we can talk about now. In 1986, it was like, that's Rick Moranis. He's a good guy, damn it. He's the kind of good hero who he wouldn't beat his woman, And now it's like, yeah, that's true, but he's the creepy guy who thinks he's entitled to the girl, or
he's going to be the hero, the one that moans, or nice guys finish last, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and also obviously that it's made the film sort of challenges that, because then it sort of juxtaposes him against Steve Martin's dentist, who is phenomenal. Like, I love him in this, and his song is one of my favorites. I listen to it a lot. But like you say, it makes it slightly worse, because you then go, well, of course he's the good guy, and but the film is still telling you, well, yeah, he didn't kill, the dentist, like that was but he was going to.
Right, he's willing to.
He was willing to, and the same with Mr. Mushnick. Like, he dies, and you're sort of like, well, he covers that up. He's still like, he's still party to this, and so he's not all good. Like, it's one of those of sort of saying, like, well, I was just following orders, or I was just sort of, I was the witness. So it's an interesting one, but it's still a phenomenal film because of that.
Well, and I think that those points, while I would like Seymour to be a little more like the play, a little more aggressive, a little more guilty, just to, keep the audience from romanticizing him. Those things actually, in retrospect, do show this sort of complicity, that sort of nice guy, like, rationalization, like, hey, I'm not that bad, I don't hit women, like, right, but, you're still a creep, But the thing you said about satire, that with that ending, yes, it's corporate, but so much of, again, I think that ending has only aged well, and it's not the new ending, and it's not the director's cut, and it's not that it's just post Me Too, it's also post income disparity, and recognizing, there's the Down on Skid Row and the black Greek chorus, and in retrospect, right? Of course, the deck is stacked against you. You're not, you want that fame, but it comes at a terrible price. You're not going to get the girl you loved before you got famous. No, and but that's the world's going to be screwed up. And you're doing service to, you're doing service to corporate America and to interests that you don't really believe in order to get famous,
And that's the thing, like, there's that song where the song of complicity, where Audrey 2 convinces him, sort of like, when he says, like, do you want this, do you want that, and eventually he's like, oh, I'd like a Harley machine, I want to sort of be tooling around like I was James Dean. He gets into that idea of, like, this within my reach, like, all I've got to do, only just this, or only that. And obviously that line of morality keeps creeping. And at that point, you're like, oh no, you're off too far gone. Like, this is your. At what point do you become irredeemable because you're chasing fortune and fame at a cost? Because again, it's sort of, it's never going to end, is it? That's the point.
Yeah. I would say not all the songs are great. There are songs that obviously are, incredibly influential. Somewhere That's Green, which again only pays off with a real ending. It's creepy. But this movie does have its flaws. It's not perfect. The girl is a little ditzy, and there are issues here. Having said that, it's a strange thing to say, but if you could, of the 5-minute sequences in all of cinema history, the original director's cut ending to this is among my favorite 5-minute sequences ever produced on film, period. And that's saying an awful lot.
Yeah. And like you say, it's made, because if you could just watch that, it's fun, it's brilliant, it works. It's like a music video, the way it works with the song. It's phenomenal. And also the model work that's done in it as well. And some of the ideas, it's it's akin to sort of like Mars Attacks in the sort of like the craziness, like a giant Audrey 2 eating a train, or pulling down buildings and the bridges and all this other stuff. It's fun. It's absolutely fantastic. But in line with the film, it just makes it better.
And I'm such a sucker for endings. Everybody talks about beginnings. Endings stick with me a lot more. You could not imagine ending on a higher note than this 5 minutes. I mean, which I think was part of the problem. I mean, they certainly made the right decision commercially. But part of the problem is that it ends on this high note, and you're sort of like you're brought to this moment of climactic ecstasy by the end, except everything's screwed up, and it's like, where are the heroes? Where are those Michael Bay characters? Where's Bruce Willis in Armageddon to stop this? No. So, what an ending.
Yeah, and what a film. So my score on this one is I gave this an 8.5.
Precisely what I have it as.
Yeah. And it's a high recommend. I think people should definitely go check this one out. Okay, this one's going to be an interesting one. So we're jumping into the 90s. We're leaving the 80s behind. But talking about heroes that would have killed Audrey 2 with his bare hands and his teeth. Sylvester Stallone in Demolition Man.
Well, this was one of your choices, and it was inspired by polling the Twitter audience. So follow us at Pod Time Space, and you could have a role in selecting. In fact, we've already asked people to select a couple films from the coming season.
We have,
This was one, like Buckaroo Banzai, that I had actually seen this or seen part of it, but I didn't remember it. I was surprised by how much I liked it. I was surprised. It's not a good movie. It's not an amazing movie. Doesn't have a lot to say, but it actually works pretty well.
Yeah. I think so. I think the thing is, watching it with a critical eye this time, I reevaluated it in line with the understanding that I've always watched it as just an action film. I've just sort of sat there, switch my brain off, right? I'm going to watch Stallone kick ass and Wesley Snipes be the villain, and it's going to be good fun. And then I watched it this time, and I'm actually watching it. Like, I'm fully engaged with this film. And there was a bit of like an eye-opening moment when I'm like, oh, hang on. This film is actually trying to do something, and I've never noticed it before. Like, that whole opening scene is the sort of the over, like the testosterone is flowing like a bloody tsunami. Like, it's just so overly macho. And then you get the whole sort of satire throughout the sort of the in San Angeles of all the sort of like the mini tunes and the Taco Bell being the only restaurant to survive the restaurant wars and so on. Like, there's so much in this that's almost like Judge Dredd, that this utopian thing. And I'm like, oh, that's what it is. And then you sort of you get into it, and I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. And then it does then devolve back into an action film towards the end. But I started to see this in a new light, and I was like, oh, actually, no, I can appreciate this more. But we'll get into my buts in a minute. But but that was when I sort of saw it this time. I appreciate it on a different level.
Well, I mean, this is clearly that trash movie, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is. It's got Dennis Leary, for God's sake. It's, like that museum scene where it's like, oh, well, one floor below them. It's, there's a lot that just doesn't make sense, but, and it is that action movie. It doesn't really want to. I mean, this is not, The Man Who Fell to Earth, it's not trying to be. It's trying to be a summer blockbuster entertainment, but it is remarkably successful at weaving those themes, including like the fact that I quite like that they don't have sex in person anymore, and the whole corporate thing, and everything is a franchise restaurant now. There's a lot that it is working at, that gives it a theme, that gives it a sort of heart, or sort of has threads woven through it that make it be better or work more or about something more than just the punchy.
Yes, yeah, I agree, and it definitely it slightly elevated it, but in doing so, and this was sort of the problem I then had in elevating it and saying, oh, actually, this isn't just fun punchy, and it can be watched as just fun punchy, and I will just watch it again in that way. However, it then sort of led up to this thing of going, I was watching it and thinking, and we discussed on the show, there's a much better version of this film.
Yes. Absolutely.
Where they really wanted to do something. If they really dug into this, and we said like John Spartan as a character needed to be, slightly different. He's a bit too quickly turned to becoming, adapting to the future, and he needs to have this arc that needs to either end in his death or, exiling himself off or something, that he cannot be a part of this world anymore. And I was like, I wish they'd been braver with this film, but I don't think that was the mission. But yeah,
and I think that you could do that and still keep the adrenaline, right?
Oh, yeah.
Keep the sort of like Total Recall fun, right? It's a delicate balance. But I mean, we have this problem when we discuss movies. Like they say that one thing critics should never do is talk about the movie that they wanted to have seen. Right?
Yeah.
That's imposed. We do that all the time. And not only that, but often make suggestions for rewrites. And often, especially as a writer, I'm humbled by your suggestions. That your suggestions are often, minimal effort, like the easiest path to maximum change for the better in the script. And this was one of those examples where it's like, oh yeah, no, that maybe it comes from your experience managing things. That it's like, right, here's what you could do. It's really quite remarkable.
The thing is, but that's always the disappointment when I watch these films again, especially when films you enjoy, and you say about the choices made. You say about like Buckaroo Banzai and other things. Like there are films that we've watched and we've discussed, and you're right. Like let's be clear. We're not critics, we don't get paid to be critics. We are just giving our opinions, and our opinions usually make films better. And if anyone wants to argue with that, then that's tough. That's what I think. But like you say, when you see these things and you do go, you're just several degrees away from the right decision. And there's a number, but the thing is, knowing that, the way Hollywood works and the way films work, there's a number of reasons as to why that decision probably wasn't made. There's a whole load of different agendas on set or visions or whatever. But it is frustrating when you do see a film and you're like, oh man, like if you'd have just made these slight tweaks, at this point, like you would elevate this film, like you were saying with the Little Shop of Horrors, like the difference between that ending, which is quite big, but still a decision was made, is a whole point and a half in reviewing it. And I think the same with Demolition Man. Like if you'd have gone through and they'd have had this slightly darker, kept the adrenaline, but gone slightly darker with some of this stuff, you could still keep the sort of some of the humor with Sandra Bullock and some of those characters, the future stuff, but like ended in a slightly darker place. Like it would elevate this film to be one of those films that would stand out, that people would be like, oh my god, yeah, Demolition Man is a real touchstone for dystopian science fiction.
Yes, and I think that, you're right to focus on the ending. And, this ending, you're right that he can't adjust. He's got to, sacrifice himself and say, I come from a time where we did that. I'm going to give you the best version of me, and you're going to carry on in your version. The ending that we get, like that kiss works, it should not work, right? Because it's such a, sort of masculine imposition sort of thing. But, it somehow has that movie magic for me, at least. But this idea that, the white man who flexes his muscles is going to just convince them that they need to change their ways and that they're totally wrong about everything. And they, and it's the conservatism, the sort of like far right neo-Nazi conspiracy conservatism of this movie that is seen in the like complete helplessness of the cops to somebody who does have a gun and is violent. The complete like, well, we didn't know anything, a survival. I mean, I come from a country filled with survivalists with AK-47s. It's like, this is their fantasy that, the country's just going to say, oh, well, you're right. We need you, and we're going to change our liberal ways and stop giving kids free lunches.
Yeah.
There's something creepy about that. And despite that this is working at a much higher level than I would expect.
Yeah, and I enjoy it for that. I mean, the thing you just said, and I thought about it sort of since, there was, we may have even mentioned it, but like the end of one of the Disney Plus shows, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when the Falcon becomes the new Captain America, like he has this speech, and in that speech he sort of says to these sort of governmental bodies, he's like, you've got to do better, and they're like, well, how? He's like, I don't know, you've just got to do better. Like there is a better way of doing this, but it's that acknowledgement of saying like, I can't answer that question for you, but you're the intelligent, smart people. Like try and be better. And in this film, they're like they sort of try and do the same thing, but it sort of misses the point a little because he's like, you've got to get cleaner, you've got to get your hands dirty, and you'll meet somewhere in the middle. And then he wanders off, and you're like, hang on, no, you've just completely torn down this society, And that's where it sort of fits. It doesn't fall apart, but it's sort of that ending sort of like, is sort of like, now I'm just going to walk away. And you're like, all those criticisms of you being the Demolition Man are completely true. Like, you've just made this massive mess and now you're walking away from it. And it's like, yeah, okay. But the rest of the film does work and I really enjoy it as for the different reasons. And also, again, we talk about Stallone, but Wesley Snipes is great in this. I actually really enjoy Wesley Snipes in this film.
Yeah, at least he seems like he's having fun.
Yeah. He got talked into doing it as well. It was going to be Dennis Rodman at one point. Thank God it wasn't.
Wow.
So yeah. Anyway, so what was your score then for Demolition Man?
Well, I gave it a 6. That sounds a little critical, but that's this. Looking back, that's the same score I gave Star Wars, Akira, and as well. Mars Attacks and Minority Report. So, I think that's in line.
Yeah. I give it a 6.5. Because I think I am also quite sort of fond of the sort of boom boom punchy as well. So
I am too.
Yeah.
We did Starship Troopers.
Yes.
I think you and I like but I like the sort of like Verhoeven punchy, right?
Yes.
The sort of like, if you're going to do punchy, do over the top, give me that social commentary, and I feel like there's a model in my head for how to do that. And this is coming in under that.
If you really wanted to do this, and if you were clever enough, I don't know if you've ever seen Cobra, which is Stallone's version of like Dirty Harry. Which was also his original idea for Beverly Hills Cop, but that's a different story. That character, if you took in sort of like Mario Cobretti and made him Demolition Man, where it's really sort of like trying for that moody, gritty kind of thing, like, and then took it to that far extreme, like you get Verhoeven levels of satire. Like, that would have worked a lot better. I agree. Right. Okay. So we're going to jump right into the far future of 1999.
Oh yes, with Strange Days.
Yeah, Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days. I really enjoy this film. It's again that one I go back to. It doesn't get talked about enough. This sort of sent me on a bit of a Catherine Bigelow, not deep dive. I haven't watched everything she's done, but I watched about several of her films. Obviously Point Break, Blue Steel, I've seen this. She's got a really solid back catalogue of films and a really good style that I really enjoy. And it sort of obviously continues with this film.
Yeah, and they're very different in genre. Obviously, she's not like the sci-fi director or the action director or the whatever. I think that, we were talking about sort of visual poetry. This is in some ways a tough to watch movie. It does not tell you what the point of any scene is. And I keep coming back to this kind of the way in which it's directed, and that it immerses you in this world and in these characters. It never tells you what the point of a scene is. It never tells you what's important. It never tells you, really what to feel or how to take what the takeaway is. And I think that is confusing to viewers. I think that is not the way we're trained to watch stuff, but it is closer to real life. And I think that she tends to direct that way. You have to kind of realize that and go along for the ride. This was also one of those films where sort of 20 minutes in, I thought, what the hell am I watching? I don't know who these characters are. They're referencing people who I haven't met yet, and I can't quite remember the names they referenced, which might be important later. I don't know how this world works, but it's that kind of tapestry effect, and I think it's masterfully done. This is not a perfect movie, but I just think it's masterfully done in terms of how it tells the story.
I agree. Yes, it's another one though where sort of like it's several sort of stories woven together. It works as that sort of it's a gumshoe sort of detective story, isn't it? Without being a gumshoe detective story sort of thing. You have several cases that all of a sudden sort of like come together at the end of the film, and I like how it does that, and it does it. I wouldn't quite say with ease because there is some work involved, but it does it smoothly, like it fluidly sort of flows through. It does need you to do some work. You're right, because there are ways sort of like they're referencing, especially like Juliette Lewis's character, where like it's clear she's being referred to from the off, and you're like, who? No, until you meet her, then you're like, oh, okay. Now I almost need to go back and see those scenes again to understand like what that relationship was and who that was. And no, but I do like this film. And again, it's that thing of ideas and themes and stuff coming through and sort of being held. And again, like people in this cast are just, I would say 90% of the cast is well cast, is the right choice. I think we both sort of said, but like Ralph Fiennes is probably the one where I'm like, well, you in retrospect, I'm always like, he feels like the weak link in casting, not in performance. Like I think his performance is fine, but I'm like, for what you're supposed to be, I feel like there's other characters, other actors that would probably may have done better at the time. But I love Juliette Lewis, Tom Sizemore, Angela Bassett in particular is really good in this.
In retrospect, I love Ralph Fiennes in this, and in retrospect, I feel like he is so much of what I love about this movie, and I didn't the first time through. I was just, I'd seen parts of it, and before, I don't know that I had certainly not watched it with the critical eye, but I love how not leading man he is. He is so unlikable and down and out and swarmy in every shot and every scene. And I love that. It's not the correct, quote unquote, commercial choice. But that's part of why I love it. And I think Juliette Lewis, there are scenes where she comes off as maybe not acting well or immature, but it works for that character, who's ultimately got problems and is protecting him. In retrospect, I think it's Tom Sizemore and the mobster who Juliette Lewis is working with that both seem a little over the top, depending on the scene. Sizemore's good as a cop coming in, but at the end it's
that finale.
Whereas I feel that Fiennes and Lewis are what I remember. I mean, I know them. I know the world that they're inhabiting. I feel that universe with those characters. And I don't really know what universe the other two are in.
No, I can sort of see what you're saying, but I'm just going to check the guy's name. But the the
mobster.
Yeah, I think the problem I have with Ralph Fiennes again is association. Because I know him as the English gentleman kind of sort of character. It's a bit weird. But he is good. His performance is good. But I often think like, is there someone that would have been better? The other one though is Michael Wincott, who plays the sort of the mob boss. And I agree. I think the thing is when you look at the other films he's done around this time, I'm just going to check because he's done a number of things. he's one of these actors. He's fine. I've seen him in a number of different things. So I'm just going to say, there you go, 97. So he's done like Strange Days, but he'd just done The Crow. He's one of the villains in The Crow, so he's very over the top in. He'd done The Three Musketeers a few years before, where he was the sort of chief baddie for Tim Curry's De Richelieu. And then he also went on to do in 97, he went to do Alien Resurrection, and he's massively over the top in that. So he sort of gets picked to do these kinds of things where it's a bit more panto.
Yeah.
And I think he brings that to this, and it sort of feels slightly out of place.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love Ralph Fiennes, Angela Bassett, Juliette Lewis. I mean, those are, I really feel as if they know each other. They're in the same universe together. I think I would get rid of Sizemore. I mean, I love Sizemore in Natural Born Killers, but I think he, like you were identifying with Michael Wincott, I think Sizemore is better at playing over the top, guys. And this wants to be a sort of like, gritty science fiction, LA riots sort of corruption story. It's good at that. It's all the sort of over the top stuff that doesn't quite fit.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I sort of, I agree with you saying with those actors. I think I'll give Sizemore a little bit more of a pass because I think he has some scenes that are really good. I don't think Michael Wincott has a scene that he's good in. It's sort of like he's clearly playing something different. However, I really enjoy the way this film works. Like, this film feels like a cyberpunk novel. Like, this becomes like a cyberpunk thriller. Like, this is a film where I can imagine if this was a novel, like a book, I would read this and I can see this being a twisty, turny sort of. And it works on that for me. I'm following the mystery. I'm following the sort of like the different things that are going on. Like, there's this tape, this VR tape from the memory, sort of from the squid of these two cops killing this sort of this black musician, or he's also a protester, and that's interwoven with this other thing to do with Juliette Lewis's character and Tom Sizemore, and it's all sort of, it just works so well on that story. For the plot is dense, and there are sort of a few sort of plot holes or sort of loops of logic, but like I kind of enjoy that, and I think this rattles along really well, and I love that ending. I just love the way sort of Angela Bassett sort of like the two-leveled ending. You've got Angela Bassett facing off against those two cops in the crowd, and you've got the rioters like perched waiting for an excuse to riot. And they take her down and they give her a beating, and it's sort of like, you're like, Jesus. And the whole thing works of the riot police coming in and then shooting down Vince D'Onofrio, and I just really rock with this film.
Yeah, I mean, except we discussed how that ending is too pat. How I get that the chief of police is somebody who Ralph Fiennes would trust, but it's the sort of like it evokes the LA riots and police brutality while still believing that one good cop is the solution. And I think in the same way, I mean, that the fight on the balcony is a little over the top. I mean, there's a like that belongs in more Demolition Man than it does in this. And I think you make an excellent point about sort of this being a dense, 300-page cyberpunk novel. I mean, I would read the hell out of that. And I think that is where this movie excels.
Yes.
But there is an awful lot of it that isn't quite up to that level, or that is like the vestiges of Hollywood tropes, or an attempt to kind of be commercial despite this uncommercial plot and setting and main character.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's trying to sort of like, where is your target audience? Like, what are you going for? Do you descale the plot and then descale the budget and therefore go really cult, or do you become commercial and try and get the wider audience? I think it's trying to do a bit of both, and it doesn't quite make it. However, this film still stands up to me. I think it's a beautiful film. I think the way it's shot, I think, like you say, it's really sort of dense. It's swinging for the fences, but But yeah, no, I think this film sort of stands up to me in many ways. I mean, not to be, sort of probably try and pick up the pace. I gave this a 7.
Yeah, I gave this a 7 too. Masterfully directed. My give Catherine Bigelow any sci-fi movie she wants to do, fund it, make it happen.
Yeah, I would say like her back catalogue is totally worth checking out. She's done some interesting films. We'll rattle through the next one because I think we both have agreed.
Speaking of masterpieces,
yeah, I found something out about this film the other day that I will get into, but we're going to be talking about 1997's Event Horizon. So the first thing I found out about this film only exists because Kurt Russell. No, you don't like Kurt Russell, but Kurt Russell made this film exist.
Another reason for me not to.
So, Paul W.S. Anderson, after this film, went on to make another film called Soldier.
Yes.
And so, which is also a film we may get to one day. I haven't seen it in a long.
Not good.
No, I haven't seen it in such a long time. Anyway, they were scheduled to make Soldier. But Kurt Russell said, because he was getting on, he'd lost a lot of weight and stuff to look for The Vanishing or another film he'd done. So he wanted time to get in shape. So he said he wanted 12 months or just over 12 months to dedicate to training. So this gave Paul W.S. Anderson time to make another film. So he had a script kicking about and stuff. And so they went ahead and they gave him the green light to make Event Horizon. Now, there are people in this film that basically had been promised to make a film with Paul W.S. Anderson within that year. So Jason Isaacs and I'm going to check now. Jason Isaacs and 2 others basically are in this film because their contract with the studio said that they had to do a film with Paul W.S. Anderson within the year that this was being made.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's how you want to make your decisions.
That sort of tells you a lot. This goes back to this idea of who is it? It was who we got. So yeah, Jason Isaacs and Sean Pertwee. There it is. Those two both also appear in Soldier. And we're supposed to. So that's why we have Event Horizon. Now, Event Horizon, this is what we said it at the time, and I had a better memory of this film, which I wish I'd kept. Where you're like, it's not a bad film. This is Hellraiser in space, and then you watch it and you're like, no, this is shit in space.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is there are fans of this, and I remember seeing when we promote this on Twitter. People saying, "All right, you're getting to talk about Event Horizon," and we sort of have to say, yeah, I'm not sure you're gonna agree with us, on this episode. And my impression is just, nothing works. There is a concept here that it could be a good film, but this is far from that concept correctly executed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if I'm perfectly honest, I think Paul W.S. Anderson he's one of these sort of directors that everything he's done is, you watch it and you go, yeah, it's all right, that. And then you sort of think about it and you go, oh, no, it's not. There's problems there, or it doesn't really work, or he's never made a film that you can't sort of completely rip to shreds. I mean, he got all his work because of Mortal Kombat in '95 and this other stuff. And so you sort of go, okay, I can see that. And then he made the Resident Evil films and you're like, oh, okay, fine. It's sort of one of those where you're like, he has a certain type of audience and a certain type of style. And unfortunately, if you want to translate that to a sort of a space-bound horror of this sort of thing, you need to be elevating it in some way. I just don't think he has the capability to do that. Yeah,
that strikes me as about appropriate. I mean, looking at his catalog, Soldier, I want to like it. Not a good movie. I mean, the Resident Evil movies are movies that I kind of admire. It carries, it has the same carries a plot forward across 6 movies. I there are good people involved. I think Mila Jovovich is great, but I don't ever leave a movie thinking that wasn't awful to one degree or another. Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of movie that needs, whether it's a John Carpenter or somebody who can really flesh out the whole notion of the hell dimension or haunted house in space.
But he tried that, didn't he? He said there's a whole load of cut footage that's only glimpsed. And the thing is, watching it this time, as you realise that, you go, oh yeah, there's this whole other bit that was cut out. Maybe that gives it more depth. When you see this, you sort of go, no, it's probably just 10 minutes of like gross, over the top special effects, which would be like, fine, that's cool, but it doesn't help the story. It doesn't make any more sense, I
remember that stupid spinning, wheel thing that looks fine, and a character going through a, like the Star Trek sort of tunnels, in the walls. And then falling, and it's like suddenly they're overhead so that you can have this like impalement scene. God, is that? I mean, like, who does that?
It's just, and that's the problem. The ship, sort of like where you are on the ship, the geography of the ship doesn't really quite make sense. The design of the ship doesn't quite make sense. Other than thematically, they're like, the ship is shaped like a big cross, right? Yes. Why?
Yeah, because you're an adolescent, and that's
because it looks cool. Yeah.
Don't forget, it's got a like detaching section that you have to blow the ship up to get it detached.
Yeah. And one of those things is, like you said, this idea of someone, and this element of Sam Neill seeing his wife and his wife having committed suicide and all this other stuff. And you're like, okay, well that's got to touch on something. We've watched Solaris, and this idea of this guy being tempted by this alien presence and all that sort of thing, and how it twists with him. Maybe that's going to have a real impact. Oh, it is, but like not in the way we think. It's just going to be, you're just going to see a suicide, then he's going to tear his eyes out. Fair enough. It never quite grasps what it should be, what it really could be. And again, you mentioned John Carpenter. Like, not too many years before this, they'd made in the Mouth of Madness with Sam Neill, which the whole idea of Sutter Kane and the novels and the metafiction and that, and the end of that film is absolutely phenomenal. I love that film. Like, that's another film I would defend. And again, like especially because it's got Sam Neill, and you watch that and you go, you've done weird, nutty, sort of similar things before, fair enough.
Yeah, this feels like somebody watched Solaris, which, whatever you think about, is a deep and meaningful movie. And it's like, that's cool. He sees his dead wife. What if instead of having all of these pretentious, thoughtful scenes on the spacecraft with like who's in there, what is the nature of reality, what does death mean? What if like he just gouges his eyes out, dude, and we see like the tendons from the injury? Like, wow. I mean, I know that's the mentality behind it.
Oh yeah, it's totally like, right, I've seen Solaris. How can we make this appealing to 14-year-old boys?
Yes. This is, Dark Knight's metal.
Yeah. Which I recently read, by the way.
You're a braver man than I am.
I wanted to revisit it. We'll talk about that some other time. But yes, I don't want to give Event Horizon much time, because it's one of those, like, to just pick it apart. It was a real disappointment to go back for me, because I thought this was something different.
Well, I am sorry for that. I gave it a 3.
I gave it a 4.5, 4.5, which is poor to meh on my scale. I don't think I'll be revisiting this. I think I've reached a point with this where I was like, yeah, I've reevaluated it. I'm not going to go back to it.
Yeah, I thought to me, like, 4 is poor, but like it's poorly executed. But I see the framework of what you're doing. You've made some bad, execution choices. 3 is legit bad. Like the concept that you're attempting to execute is also flawed, and the execution is flawed.
Yeah, everything you're doing, it's a bit like Janosch. Everything you're doing is bad. Like everything. Don't forget, you'll never do good. Okay, moving on to a slightly different scenario. Same year, 1997. Gattaca.
Yeah. Well, let's just. I would just say I didn't realize this, but I actually selected Gattaca. I had never seen it, and watching it, I don't think that I ever saw it. Whereas like Demolition Man, I saw all of it. I just don't remember it. But Gattaca is one of those movies where, it's sort of the opposite of Event Horizon in the sense that basically everything works, everything looks good, all the acting is good. I'm just sort of left with, I don't know what it really has to say. I don't feel as if I know this world. I don't have a lot of complaints. It's just a sort of closet drama in a way to me.
Mm-hmm. I know exactly what you mean. And this is one of those films that, whilst watching it, I was invested. Like, I like the cast, I like the concept, I like the movie. I think there's some great ideas in it. And immediately after, I'm like, oh, this is a good film. This, I really enjoy this film. And then like 3 or 4 weeks later, you're like, yeah, I remember some of it, most of it, maybe. It doesn't stick in the memory as well as I thought it would. It's very sort of, there's things in this that look great, like the color palette and everything, the way they chose to design it and stuff is really cool. And again, like I like Uma Thurman, like Ethan Hawke, Jude Law's great. Like, there's things in it that are really good. But like you say, there's like it never elevates the pulse enough to be like, not even like I said, not in like an action film way, but not even, there's not enough, there's never enough tension or thrills to really sort of get that into, to dig it into the memory, which is a shame, really.
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what I had completely forgotten. Jude Law, one of my favorite actors, was even in this. And, I remember those scenes incredibly fondly. I remember that relationship. I love the crossing the street. There are all these wonderful moments, including her sort of, throwing the evidence out at the end, like, oh, it got caught. I mean, so much is correctly done, beautifully done. But, I've been thinking about espionage films a lot lately, and there's a problem of not all, but certain spy films and sort of espionage films where I feel like, right, that was very well made, and I think that was a great movie. I can't imagine, it is a complex plot, it pays off, the acting is great, the twists are great, and then 2 days later I think, what is the plot of that movie? I don't remember that movie at all. It just doesn't stick in the memory. And I think the problem is it's not about anything. I mean, it does have themes. It's about sort of, corporate culture and judging people based on genetics, but it's almost like a parody of those themes. And I don't feel as if I leave the picture and I've been brought to think about any of those themes. I don't, I leave 2001 and I'm thinking about, I know you don't like that as much as I do, but I'm thinking about the nature of man's existence and our place in the stars and, human evolution. I mean, even Prometheus, I, leave thinking about some of that. This I leave and I think, that looked really good. That was well put together.
I think you're right. I think the thing is, this film starts, and this is in retrospect, as I think back on it, this film starts with the intent. Like, you are shown things of what happens to Ethan Hawke's character, Vincent, as he grows, that sort of thing of being was it degenerate or whatever, like he's basically sort of like, he's pure, like he hasn't been, or not pure, I should say, he hasn't been genetically modified. And how he's judged, and how he's got to give his, a sample of blood for his for the insurance and all this other stuff, and all that stuff's really interesting. But it's treated in such sort of like offhanded way that the story sort of, so then you get into it and you're like, okay, so the story is going to be this relationship building story. It's going to be about overcoming differences between someone who is genetically modified and someone who isn't, and how they come together to sort of make this life and accommodate all these other things between Jude Law and Ethan Hawke. And you're like, okay, that's what it's going to be, Eugene and Vincent. Well, that never really happens either. And it's there, it's in the film, that still happens. There are still scenes that sort of like allude to that and show you that, but it never quite gets there. It never gets the pulse racing. And then it's the love, then it's going to be this murder mystery. Nope, that's pretty much just a note, like almost a subplot to sort of like. So you're right, like I other than science fiction, I wouldn't know how to classify this. Like, if you go back and look at it, as we talked about, like The Eyes Without a Face, it's clearly like a sci-fi horror, or a horror with sci-fi elements. The Man Who Fell to Earth or Star Trek. You can look at these and go, oh, it's a science fiction blah. Like, it has other things you can classify it as. I would really struggle to classify Gattaca. But I still like it. Like, there's still things in this I think that's really well done. It looks great. Again, like set design and sort of like the setup of the world is great. The cast are good. Like, it's solid throughout. I like the ending. I really like the ending. The way it sort of like, it works out. We said about Hollywood. It's still not a Hollywood ending. He gets to his mission, but like there's these little milestones along the way. Like Jude Law sort of leaving him all that stuff, and you realise that he's actually been sort of like working for him behind the scenes for all this time, and then that doctor at the thing sort of like has always known and has been supporting him and all this other stuff. But it never, like you said, even those moments never get the heart pounded or sort of racing. There's no sort of like, it's not fist pumping. You know what I mean? It's not like they're going for a celebratory ending, but it's not fist pumping ending. And so, yeah, it just feels like very flat lines.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about how, in terms of theme, it sort of has that sort of like Twilight Zone feel to it, where this is an elaboration on an idea. And those ideas in the Twilight Zone, which we're discussing on Patreon, if you want to contribute to the podcast, they take the theme or an idea and they sort of tease it out and put a narrative around it. And if it has anything to come back to that theme and sort of have to say about that theme, that's great. But it could just be teasing that out and making a story out of it. I don't feel at the end of this, like you were talking about the beginning and how Ethan Hawke suffers. And you think, I guess that's not good, And by the end of it, you sort of have more questions about Ethan Hawke than you do the society.
Yeah.
And I don't feel as if I want to change that society or destroy that society. I might want to tweak it on the edges. Like I was thinking of like Fahrenheit 451, where there's no deep commentary except burning books is bad, and here's a fascist society that does that. Right. I want that society to be destroyed, but at least I have some emotional engagement with that. Here, it's all very well done, but it strikes me as almost like a play, and not in a good sense. I mean, there are plays that are really engaging, but just sort of one thing after another. It's all very well acted. It's all, very well written. It's a movie version. It's a very well directed, but it feels very close. And not in a good way. I don't feel as if that's a cross-section of a society, or, it's not like Glass Menagerie where it's like, well, the Midwest is really oppressive to an artist, No, it's just like, all right, here's a story about a guy that's well told.
One of the things we've said when doing the Twilight Zone is we acknowledge the shortness of those episodes. They're like 22, 25 minutes long. But there's been a few episodes where we've said, wow, if this was 45 minutes long, if it was given an extra 15 to 20 minutes, I could really expand that. It would be a really solid episode. We've had a couple of those. Then they've crammed too much in that time, or they think you'd want it to breathe a little more.
or explore another idea or character.
Yeah, there's just something extra there you'd want to sort of them to keep going on. This film, and we said again, we did talk about this idea of being we felt that Twilight Zone connection. This is one where I think, like, if this was half an hour shorter, if this was an hour-long episode and you had to make it really tight for TV, I think you would have a really strong hours TV of an anthology series.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think runtime is really important. And, it's something that, and again, this is, I'm looking at what the runtime is. It's only 106 minutes.
Yeah.
These days, anything under 2.5 hours is short.
Yeah.
But it's 106 minutes, but it does feel long at 106 minutes. And I don't have a lot to, I'm criticizing. I don't have a lot to really criticize it for. I think the performances are really good. The casting is good. The writing is good. Shot after shot is beautiful. It could use a little more of a budget just to see the exterior of the buildings or a shot of the city, that kind of thing, to just help me place it.
I think the thing with this, I agree with what you said, and there are moments in this film I really love. There are still scenes I still think are great, and there are little sort of set pieces that are great. But I think one of the things in this to highlight that I think encapsulates this is the love affair between Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke. And there's a scene when they hold hands whilst they're watching a guy who's been, he's had extra fingers because that's sort of his thing. He can do this one type of concerto. And you go, oh, right, so they're falling in love. This is the only signifier I have of that.
Yes.
Because nothing else is telling me that this is the case. And there's a coldness to it. And so, but it doesn't want to explore that either. There's a reason for that, because is that part of the genetic manipulation? Like, they are this pure breed. And it never sort of drills down into the society, as you say. And that's almost the disappointment, because constantly it gives you things where you're like, oh, that there's a scene where they round up, don't they? The police are rounding up all those degenerates, looking for the killer, and they've got them in like a fenced off area. And we both said, it's like a 2-minute scene, but you're like, hang on, no, I want to see that. What is that about? Where do they live? What is going on there? That's the story. And this is one of those things where, I think either make it an hour-long TV episode of an anthology show, or an 8-episode TV show that gets to do all these things and explores this world on a bigger budget. It's just somewhere in the middle.
I like that point very much. And the thing about the coldness, I very much feel like Deckard and Rachel and Blade Runner have a similar coldness, but there I feel as if even that has more heart. That is, and there it feels like it's defined by their society, right? I'm watching life in St. Petersburg during the winter or something, and it's like, wow, everything is so terrible in this post-apocalyptic thing. We love each other, but you could die in a snowbank tomorrow. It's that kind of, it's about something. It's a reason why it's emotionally cold. They just seem cold, and maybe that's supposed to be a reflection of that corporate culture in which people are disposable. I think it is, but it doesn't feel connected. It doesn't. The movie doesn't do the work to connect it for me.
No. And so I think
especially not when they're rounding people up, like you said.
Yeah, and so there's much more to do this. So just so we can let's move on from that. So I think it's a fine film, and I do think it's one I think probably worth revisiting as a bit of a touchstone. But I gave this a 6.
Well, I gave it a 7.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a good film. It doesn't go beyond that, but I think it's a good film. Why don't we discuss Open Your Eyes and Vanilla Sky together, since they're sort of the same plot?
Yes, let's do that. I think it's a good idea. So, Open Your Eyes and Vanilla Sky, a couple of years apart. Penelope Cruz connects the two. And we did do this comparison piece really as a sort of a standout for the season. And I've thought back on these two. I'm trying to sort of think how to articulate this. Which one stuck with me more is what I've been thinking, and then in which ways. And the more I thought about these two, the more they sort of bleed together, but also sort of come apart. It's almost like a lava lamp effect. It's like they sort of meld together, but then fall, come apart. And there's this weird effect of like, I like this element of the Spanish version, but like there's other bits that just don't work. And sort of then there's like things with like Vanilla Sky where I'm like, I really like this, and this is where they gel together, and but then this bit doesn't work over here. It's a really bizarre. This sort of Hollywoodization and this sort of European cinema sort of coming together becomes a very interesting comparison. Which is why I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that. I tend to be a little more down on Cruise than other people tend to be. But I was quite taken with him this time through. And for me, the Vanilla Sky was better than Open Your Eyes, which was the reverse of In the Past, which to me suggests, and I found Vanilla Sky really haunting. And I remember sort of having to stop in the middle of it and have a smoke and because it just hits on so many things of my life and so many anxieties. But I think that the fact that those sort of flipped indicate that sort of the opposite of Gattaca, that Gattaca's minute for minute more meticulously made than probably either of these films. Having said that, both of these films have material that sticks with me and that I want to keep thinking about and I carry forward. And it's probably a good sign that as I get older, what resonates with me is enough to flip my estimation.
No, yeah, I can see. I know what you mean. And this
but you're wrong.
No. It's interesting to me because I'd only ever seen Vanilla Sky before. Like I'd never seen Open Your Eyes. So this was interesting for me to sort of see. Oh, here's the original. Like this is the original concept, and it's very 90s. I think Open Your Eyes is incredibly 90s in many ways. And there are elements in it that I really like. Like I like the fact that it, as we said, the sort of the main character. His disfiguration in Open Your Eyes is much more evident. It's played up a hell of a lot more. So this idea of the mask seems to make a lot more sense. And his bitterness and sort of thing comes through. And so that this character, they're very different characters between the two. And so I had more confusion in that one when you're like, yeah, why is Penelope Cruz even interested in this guy? Like, he's clearly an absolute prick.
You mean in which version?
In Open Your Eyes, because he never comes across well. Like, he's clearly a bad guy, which is fine. And I used to, but I'm quite happy and fine with that. But like, it makes you question like that relationship, and he comes across more aggressive. And so the night in the disco, which is the turning point, becomes much more understandable in Open Your Eyes. However, when you watch Vanilla Sky, the relationships between everybody, all the characters, work so much better for my money. Like, when you watch it, okay, I understand this, and the relationship with I remember it for bloody hell, Leggy Blonde. Cameron Diaz. Oh my god, yeah. I understand that much more as to why she does what she does, and this idea of being rejected and being, falling in love, and also like she's clearly like, slightly crazy, but like it makes more sense. It makes more sense as to why he gets in the car, like his experience of guilt and all this other stuff. Like all that works, yet still that turning point moment in the bar makes less sense.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's that sort of thing of going, I love all this. What I'm saying about this lava lamp, where I'm like, I love all this stuff you've got going on over here, but then this does like oil, and it's sort of like, woo, I can't. It doesn't quite gel together. So between the two, there's this sort of like mixing together. I'm like, the two they work for each other, but there's bits in each that really sort of challenge me.
Yeah, I think I love what you're saying. I think in memory, I remember the characters and the actors better from Open Your Eyes. I like that the protagonist, I mean, he's handsome, but he's Spanish handsome. I mean, he doesn't have the same, polished Hollywood look. I like that. I think Penelope Cruz is, I fall in love with her a little more in Open Your Eyes. The actress of the rival who winds up killing them. I mean, I picture her more than I picture Cameron Diaz. And I don't like what's his name, Escape from New York guy, as the
Kurt Russell.
Yeah, I don't like Kurt Russell as the psychiatrist. So there are a lot of ways in which, like, the ways that I imagine these characters, I imagine them Open Your Eyes, and yet the world that they inhabit, I imagine Vanilla Sky. Like, I imagine the cars. I imagine New York. I mean, Times Square being creepy. I imagine EL, or LE, the life extension, looking like that. I love tech support, and I crying out for that, and the surreality of this. I think it does a better job of making you feel like you're going crazy watching it, and I think that, to me, that suggests that the Hollywoodization, that extra money, is put to good effect. Yes. That if the things that are lacking in the Spanish version are the overall world and the stuff that costs money, okay, that's understandable.
Yeah. No, because it feels like the Spanish version feels like an independent film, doesn't it? Like, it looks and feels like an indie film, which is fine, again, because it's very 90s. I've got no problem with that. I think the thing is, like you say, one of the things that works best is that Cruz has more charisma, and it just carries so much more, and he's able to do that because he's a Hollywood star. Like, he knows how to utilize the screen. Him and Cameron Crowe clearly work together to do this, to have that impact. And so some of those scenes, like you say, the scene of Times Square being empty, or like you said, you want to call him for tech support, and there's other scenes as well, sort of like, where he is doing things, and he is. I'm not saying he's a fantastic. Like, he's not an Oscar-winning actor, in my opinion. He's a movie star. A movie star comes with a level of charisma that just works for this film that I think is lacking from the other film. But I also think that works for the cast. I think one of the things we said, or at least I said, was one of the reasons you fall in love, or at least I agree, you fall in love with Penelope Cruz more in Open Your Eyes, is because she is the shining star of that film. Like, you watch that film and you're like, oh yeah, there's no question as to why she then has a Hollywood career after this. Like, she's a great actress, she's beautiful, she knows how to, she has that X factor. And then you get moving to Vanilla Sky, you put an extra Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz who's coming through at the same time, and you're like, oh, okay, you've just leveled out. You haven't lost anything. You're just up there with everybody else.
Right. You're in the big leagues now.
You're in a bigger pond. You're not the big fish anymore. You're the same size fish, but in a bigger pond. And it works though, but it works on a great effect. But like you say, they then pull back on things like the murder mystery element sort of feels lesser in Vanilla Sky. And I agree, this isn't great Kurt Russell. I think, he tries to play this. The character they're trying to give him is different to the one that's in Open Your Eyes. They have this idea of, they play with this idea of a father figure, this pop culture idea of the father figure. And I'm still going like, then why did you cast Tom Cruise? Like, why didn't you cast someone who's older and like, Sam Elliott or
fatherly.
Yes, you want someone who's going to look sort of like, be that fatherly figure rather than Kurt Russell, so that's a bit of an unusual one, but it still works. It just seems to come together as a film slightly better, I think, than Open Your Eyes.
No, I think so too now. One of the things that occurs to me just now talking about it is that Open Your Eyes, you were saying it feels like an independent film. It feels like a Spanish film. One of the things that occurs to me is that it doesn't feel uniquely Spanish. Vanilla Sky is uniquely American.
Yes.
And one of the things that Vanilla Sky does that I really love, because it can afford the music and whatnot, is this sense of, you know, the good vibrations, but also the sense of the Americana and the Bob Dylan cover and the ways in which our lives are influenced by these ideas of romance, even from Hollywood.
The cover, that album cover, like say when he's, you know, he replicated the album cover in a memory, like stuff like that. That's the stuff I liked at the end of the film when they're like the text supports explain it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and even the concept of Vanilla Sky, which isn't in there in the original, of, you know, you got this from a painting, right? Your idea of what a romantic, beautiful sky is. So, you know, thinking about this now, I'm thinking about, when I studied Spanish cinema at university, I had a professor who said basically all Spanish cinema is about the Spanish Civil War. And it works. It is absolutely true. I mean, you could run that analysis. So if you want to run that analysis, and Amenabar has tried to get away from that. You know, he's tried to like make movies that were, I mean, even when he was doing low budget stuff in Spain, he's tried to make movies that were pitched to an international audience and responded to Hollywood and weren't just in a Spanish cinema niche. And I think that's why, a big part of why this is successful. But you could see the totalitarian sort of magic realism distortion of reality under the Franco regime as being reflected in Open Your Eyes of, you know, what is real. That's there if you want to find it.
But surely like that thing of the paranoia as well, when he talks about his partners, this thing of this other that you never see coming to take away his business and stuff, which is obviously fleshed out more in Vanilla Sky.
Very good point. Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. And it's strange, but that movie doesn't lean into it.
Yes.
It doesn't. It feels like it could easily be transposed onto another location, which, even though it has Spanish themes, you could argue, you know, it is a Spanish film in a quintessential way. It feels like it could be transposed. And then when you see it transposed, it's amazing how, you know, some of those themes aren't as rich, like the murder mystery, but Cameron Crowe is able to add this other layer of sort of Americana and television and sort of like, you know, the network, the all-consuming aspect of American entertainment that, you know, almost has become more important to us than our actual relationships, in a way that I found really interesting between the two.
No, I agree. I think it's a really good point, because it's that thing of leaning into it. Like Cameron Crowe does lean into that idea of the Americana and lean into the American experience, where, like you say, the Spanish one sort of leans away from the Spanish experience and probably is slightly more generic for it. Like, very slightly. Okay, then. So saying this, what scores have we got then for Open Your Eyes and Vanilla Sky?
Okay, this time around, I gave Open Your Eyes a 7 and Vanilla Sky the 8. In the past, I would have flipped those two.
Okay, I've given Open Your Eyes a 6.5. And I've given Vanilla Sky a 7. They're very sort of marginally. It's because, again, like I said, there's just bits from one I like and the other from, and you know, they do meld together in that sort of lava lamp kind of way. But no, yeah, they were. I'm glad we got to do that as a comparison piece. Okay, finally, as I
last but not least,
yeah, and as I described in the episode, we're gonna end with some waffly bollocks. We're going to end with The Fountain. So Hugh Jackman, Rachel Weisz, and possibly a meta-fiction narrative. You know, we spoke about in sort of the last episode. So this is the most recent one we've sort of talked about, but it's in it. We've talked about these in reflection. Right? On reflection, how, in retrospect, how do we feel about these? Have they stayed with us? This one sort of stayed with me weirdly, because more because of the conversation it sparked between us than the actual film. The film's great. I think the film is beautiful. I think this is one of the best shot films we've seen. I think, you know, and then to learn that there was very little very little CGI in this and all the practical effects is even more astounding, and that's impressed me more. However, the narrative sort of style of this and the waffly bollocks about it being a story and a book then still sort of bothers me. Where I'm like, you know, it feels like that level of pretense where I'm like, yeah, I know what you're doing, but like, you know, it's sort of like meditating bald Hugh Jackman still bothers me. that last part of the film.
The transcendence, Hugh Jackman. That's, you know, when you say you're Zen Koan, you've got to have an image of bald Hugh Jackman in the lotus position in front of you. Yeah, you know what's funny is I'm the guy who can't let go, right? I'm the over intellectualizing guy, and I feel like, you know, that stuff is here. I mean, you can analyze this endlessly. You can not over intellectualize it. You can. There's meat here to get into. There are mysteries. There are things to discuss endlessly here, especially for a 96-minute movie, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much meat here. Having said that, especially in talking to you, what's amazing is this is a movie where I just totally go on the journey. And I do what everybody else does with Marvel movies, where, you know, I mean, I don't mean to hit on Marvel movies yet again, but, you know, other people go to the movies and they're like, dude, Julian, chill the F out. You know, it's a movie. It's just go with the flow, man. Like, what do you want? You know, the Winter Soldier to stop and, you know, talk about Kierkegaard. You know, it's a movie, you know, and other people can just relax into these movies. This is a movie that I relax into. And for 96 minutes, I am just engrossed. I am emotionally engaged. I'm intellectually engaged. I'm visually engaged. The audio, I'm just immersed in this world. And it has that stuff if I want to, you know, go to that intellectual place, but it also has that emotionally connective place. So, I mean, for me, this is in retrospect, this is my kind of movie.
Yeah, no. One of the things that's interesting, having talked about all these films, is that we've talked about this idea of poetry. We talked about it when we talked about this film, and I can turn this back to like Eyes Without a Face, The Man Who Fell to Earth, probably elements of Open Your Eyes and Vanilla Sky. This idea of sort of this audio visual poetry, this idea of art that's been presented to us. And again, The Fountain sort of fits into that category very much so. Like, this again is a film in poetry. This is a film, you know, they want to tell you these themes and these ideas, and it has all these sort of like interwoven and stuff. And visually, like, it tells you these things. Like, again, I still can't get over some of the visuals in this film. Like, this film is a visual feast, like an absolute stunning visual feast, right down to sort of simple, silly things like when Rachel Weisz is shown as the Queen Isabella, the fact she's got the dress is made to look like the trunk of a tree, yet she has the green leaves overlapping. Like, all this stuff is done incredibly well, fantastically well, and I'm enjoying all that. I really do. It's then this sort of thing of like the way that the narrative then folds into itself and does this and does that, and I'm like, and we talked about this idea of how I'm used to this probably in other mediums slightly more and stuff, but with this, I don't know, it just felt. Usually it felt right, you know. You get to that point and it just feels right, and I'm like, yeah, it sort of does. But the fact that that's the bit that felt right is almost wrong to me, because I'm like, oh, okay, I've been led to this point, and now the fact that that feels right feels like a cheat. And it made me sort of, as we've been talking about, it makes me think of like The Man Who Fell to Earth, where we said about there's moments when you're like, yeah, why does he see pilgrims? Like, it makes no bloody sense. Like, I don't get that. Like, get rid of it. Yet I still go on that journey, and this sort of tells me something about myself, where I'm willing to let things go in a film like The Man Who Fell to Earth, and that I won't let go in this for some reason. And the part of it is down to aesthetics. And I think I lean into like that 70s aesthetic. I just seem to appeal to me at times, where I'm like, oh no, this looks cool, it's weird, and I can have David Bowie dancing around naked, and I'm fine with that. Yet Hugh Jackman bold doing the Lotus position, sort of like, oh, this is irritating me, and I don't know why that is.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Let's push on this. I mean, because I have come to realize about myself that I am incredibly aesthetically driven, and that even in my own life, part of the reason why I should probably not live in the Midwest is like the endless fields of mud and corn and soybeans are just mind-numbing, and you know, like, I mean, I cannot stand just one concrete box after another with a parking lot. I just think, you know, I need to look at something visually striking or I'm gonna kill myself. So, you know, and it's not just visual, you know, it's also audio, it's also taste, you know, but for me, The Fountain is moment by moment, aesthetically very powerful, very striking. To me, the Man Who Fell to Earth, it's like, I mean, you were talking about set design and how we haven't talked about it enough. It's all well designed, but I'm not in another universe. Like, I'm not boggled by minute by. It's not an MTV music video, right? This is an MTV music video. This is that level of just minute by minute by minute. I'm watching, like, you know, this insane Koyaanisqatsi or whatever, right? Like, I'm on this journey. Compared to that, I mean, to me, The Man Who Fell to Earth feels like a intellectually engaging, but a very slow, unaesthetic, experience by comparison. I'm just trying to tease this out.
No, I know what you're saying, and I'm thinking about this now. And like I say, so visually, like I say, there are visually appealing things in The Fountain. And I think sometimes I think it's about, like, because, you know, we said about what the Fountain is about, and this idea of dealing with grief, and you know, getting past death, and this idea of sort of like the one or the soulmate, and all these ideas being sort of bandied around, and redemption for making mistakes in life. And so really, it's got all these themes that really appeal to me. And again, like I say, you can dig into that I don't think you can do with The Man Who Fell to Earth. There's other things there about eco and, you know, alienization and all these other bits different. And I do think this is maybe, but there's more, weirdly, I feel there's more of a narrative with The Man Who Fell to Earth. And that's the thing, you're saying you're aesthetically driven. I'm more narratively driven. And that's where it sort of, I think the blocker is for me, where I'm like, you know, as you sort of said, but those are the films, like, I'll go, well, look, you're 2 degrees off this. This is the narrative decision you probably should have made, you know, in retrospect. And I'm watching these 2 films, I'm thinking, like, oh, look, I see there's a narrative thread in The Man Who Fell to Earth, and I'm following that, and I'm following characters, and I'm enjoying that there's this weirdness along this narrative thread. But with The Fountain, I'm just going, like, it looks great, and I'm getting a feel from it, and I'm getting an emotional reaction, but I haven't got a bleeding clue what is actually going on. And I'm so that I get that, so I get that sort of frustration.
I love what you're saying, and obviously everyone's really on somewhere on the spectrum, because I think about, like, everything you're saying makes total sense to me. I think the narrative is key there. Plot is key. I mean, I think about, but I often have that same reaction where I often think, you know, I mean, every David Lynch movie, I think, you know, yeah, that's an idea. It looks fine, but that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't work there's no theme being elaborated here, you know, just throwing some shit that's pretty on a canvas doesn't make it a good movie. No. With The Fountain, so, I mean, my question is sort of, you know, we all sort of have our different tolerances. And I guess with The Fountain, I feel like it works. It's weird, but it works emotionally. It works narratively enough that I'm able to let go and get into that space, whereas I'm not in some more experimental narratives. That makes sense.
It does. I hear what you're saying, and I know exactly what you mean by this idea of sort of having watched sort of some of the David Lynch film. Again, it's that thing about weird for weird's sake. You can sometimes, and again, you said this idea of a spectrum. There's this idea of a sort of like a switchboard or sort of like a mixer's board, isn't there? This idea of sort of like, okay, they're going to really thrust up the narrative and pull down the weird or whatever. And then you're going to have themes and things thrown in. And I find that when you watch Lynch is again like this idea of, we're going to start this idea of visual poetry or, film as poetry. He's more like whatever pops into head, like, what do they call him? Sort of like a beat poet. Like it's just sort of like random stuff. I can watch, and again, people will argue with this. Like I haven't seen Blue Velvet for years, but like you can see some of his films and go, right, I can see what you're doing visually. I don't really feel there's much of a meaty theme here.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have one thing or maybe a couple, but like the film itself feels a bit more like you woke up one morning and you wanted to do something on this thing. With The Man Who Fell to Earth, it feels very much like it has a driving theme. There's some driving narrative themes there that go all the way through it. But then on the other end of the spectrum is The Fountain, where the narrative is sort of pulled back to an extent. But those themes, the emotional impact and the themes, it's the visual there. The visuals are in there for the poetry, but the themes are heavy and really well integrated into the film and beautifully presented. And so, because I'm not a fan of Lynch either. Like I just can't get on with it because I just find it's just lumpy and messy and that's what I think maybe sort of like The Man Who Fell to Earth and The Fountain are on different ends of this spectrum. And so because although they are sort of quite far apart, because they are good at doing what they are trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to sort of decide if you want that. And so I can see what you're saying. Like I lean more towards that narratively driven sort of like, thread of The Man Who Fell to Earth, but I can so see the appeal of The Fountain, even if I do take the mickey out of Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's fair, and I don't want this to to turn into the like bash David Lynch thing, which I mean that's often an argument that I have with intellectuals or film fans or pseudo intellectuals or whatever, but the I think you're right about theme, that this is so filled with theme. This is so imbued with, regret and death. And I feel like, if you can say that any movie is possibly the most effective meditation on death you've ever seen in cinema form, even if it's on a short list, that's quite a statement. And I can easily say that about this. So maybe it is that emotion, that theme that helps set it apart. If somebody, on the other hand, I know people who hate this movie, who, I'll talk to and they're my buddies and they're just like, like, oh my God, that pretentious wankery, I'll be like, I'll just laugh. And it's like, that's totally fine. And if they are moved by Lynch and I'm moved by this, I mean, we can have those discussions. And, maybe I'm more affected by a certain type of aesthetic or by theme, as you're pointing out. But at the end of the day, maybe this is the point at which stuff does become subjective and our own viewpoints break down. But if anyone is affected and goes on that kind of emotional, aesthetic, intellectual ride from cinema, hey, if they're getting it from Blue Velvet, not my particular drug, but dude, that's awesome. Go with God, I get it from The Fountain.
No, I agree with that, and what you're saying. I think the other thing to note about this as well is, and something we mentioned in the episode, is when you see this film. And I think that, again, like we said, like, you can be 23 or 22 and you watch this film and you can be like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand this whole this meditation on death. I don't get it. Like, I've not lost any. I've lost a dog. I've lost a rabbit. That's about it. Like, my grandparents are still alive. My parents are alive. I've not had this experience of death.
This might be a 23-year-old Brit as opposed to like a 23-year-old war survivor.
Yeah. But then, like you say, then you experience life and you experience these losses, and then all of a sudden, like, you may be in a relationship, or you may have passed a relationship, or whatever, and then you watch this film and you go, oh, yeah, that thing that I saw when I was watching when I was 22, 23, like, didn't impact me. Like, oh no, at 42, 43, like, it does. Like, that life experience. And that's not to say you've got to be, there's a maturity of watching this film. I think this film comes with a life experience almost requirement, and that's not to say you can't enjoy it younger. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that this film comes with, and Aronofsky is clearly of an age where he's going, no, this is my life experience and this is how I'm presenting it. And I think that's an important part of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it makes me think of, and I don't think that makes it better or worse, that it requires that. I mean, maybe it is a level of maturity, but, there's nothing wrong with stuff that I think there are things that touched me as a young man in a way that they don't touch me now. And I don't think that those things are
Catholic priests. Sorry.
No. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to make any jokes on air. It is so difficult. But I don't think that makes the things that affected me then any less deep. I just think it's different themes grow on you. And I don't think at 20 I would have been affected by Solaris. I mean, that it's just not. I'd be like, yeah, I get it. He misses his wife. Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, and I agree that I think there are certain films that you need life experience to be able to sort of bring to them. And, you hear this of actors, they've come to a role. And
I think the reverse is also true. In defense of the young, I think the reverse is also true, that there are things that don't affect me now. Like, yeah, you got to give up on your dreams, right? Because your dreams were totally unrealistic and you were super privileged. And, I get it. We all have to give up on our dreams a little, Whereas when I was 20, that was a really important theme. Like, that was a tragedy.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. But there's also, and I think when that's explored in content, and also, but I think, like, we've said this about things being made for people, sort of like, I watch TV, superhero shows is a good example to roll this out. Like, there's people that are like, I hate that. And you go, no, it's just not made for you. They've introduced a gay Batwoman. She's now black. And you go, right, fine. You're a 45-year-old male. Like, stop fucking watching it. It's not for you. Like, that's not the point. But there could
watch
be
it if you want, but it's not a slap in your face because you don't happen to be a 45-year or you don't have to be a black woman.
And I noticed these things when when I was a kid, I really enjoyed Buffy the Vampire Slayer and sort of like Serenity. You watch those shows and you go, oh yeah. And now I watch those same sort of like, not those, but you watch those CW shows or teen shows, and I'm like, yeah, I'm hating on this. Why am I hating on this? Oh yes, because it's not for me. Like, I'm not in that life. I'm not in that bit of life anymore where the challenges that they are presenting those characters with means the same to me as it did then. And that's not to say it's bad. It's just saying that I'm not in that space anymore. It's not for me. And I think that you can say the same about film. You can go, yeah, no, this film's not for you. You can watch it, you can enjoy it, you can criticize it, I hope you do enjoy it. But like, there is a person somewhere that's in a specific life moment that this film is for. And you mentioned, your trip to the cinema with your former girlfriend, that moment, and that being one of those life synchronicities where you're presented with a piece of media, and you're like, oh no, this captured a moment in time. And that's what this film does.
Yeah, very well said. Well, I gave this film a 9. Which is the same that I gave The Man Who Fell to Earth. So in that dichotomy between narrative and one that you chose and one that I chose, I think both A season with 2 9s from Julian.
That is good. I gave it a 7, which is
Wow.
pretty close. I gave
Yeah.
Manifest Worth a 7.5, so they are close, and I appreciate how good this film is. You know, I don't need any more bald Hugh Jackman in my life, but I'm
is a David Lynch moment where it's like, you know,
yeah,
right. That's the, you know,
yeah. it's just interesting the way they have him floating and glowing and all this other stuff, and it's just like, you know, it's the shock of it, but you know, it's fine. So there we are anyway. So we've done it. We've gone through our films. We've done quite a, you know, this is a hell of a wrap up. I think we've sort of given some more insight into them. That's 12 films that we've sort of looked at and given our scores on. Go back and check those. I might even put them on the website, actually. I think that'd be quite a good idea.
Yeah, I keep track. Interestingly, your highest was Little Shop of Horrors at 8.5.
Yep.
And I agree with you at 8.5. That was just like Buckaroo Banzai went down from 5 to a 4.5. I have to confess, Little Shop of Horrors went down from a 9 to an 8.5.
Okay.
So,
yes.
but you know, that was your standout but we're very close on that. So probably that's the winner of the season overall.
I think so. I think that, to be clear, when we say that, the director's cut.
Yes.
Be very clear that like the director's cut of Little Shop of Horrors is the one to seek out. And it's available on Blu-ray. I think it's the director's cut is now the one you see on streaming if you find it on streaming. So go seek it out. It's just to be sure, if you want to make sure, just quickly check the ending. No spoilers for a film that's like 35 years old. It ends with a whole load of orgies over cities, and it's fantastic. But so that's it. So that is our season 3 done. But we're not done. We never finish. This is an ongoing experiment and an ongoing project. We've got a couple of things coming up before we start season 4. I'm not going to get into the content of season 4 just yet, because that is another fantastic list. We have done the list. I'm not going to lie. You know, Julian and I have got massive long lists. Long lists of films that we want to cover, and we've got some awesome. We've got animation. We have got films coming from all over the world. We've got some Japanese. We've got Russian. We've got some British. We've got some French. We've got quite a lot of Japanese actually. Looking at the list, some classics, some something a little bit more obscure, and just to throw it in there, we have got. I'm not going to lie. We have got some. I'm not going to say which. We've got some Michael Bay. We have got some Michael Bay appearing in there. And also
true cinema is the phrase you're looking for.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Yeah, so we've got some really interesting stuff coming up, and we are covering one of the things I will say before we are covering a much wider span of time as well. We are covering we are actually covering 90 years of cinema in the next season. So that's coming up. So that'll be coming up in 2022. But before we get there, we've got a little couple of mid or inter-season bonuses for you. First, we've got a Terry Gilliam mini retrospective. We're going to be re-airing some episodes that Julian and I did for 20th Century Geek. I'm going to be re-editing those and putting those out. And then we are going to accompany those with 12 Monkeys. So we're going to be covering off sort of what is known as the Terry Gilliam Imagination trilogy of Brazil, Time Bandits, and the Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And then we're going to top that off with 12 Monkeys. And then we're going to be jumping into a blue box with a crazy man from a scrapyard. We're going to be talking about Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who. Let's be clear. Doctor Who from 63 to 89, the 7 Doctors. Well, we're going to be covering 8 Doctors, really, technically, because we're going to be talking about Peter Cushing as well. We're throwing in a Hammer Doctor just for the sake of it. So I'm going to call out the stories. So if you want to go start watching, let's talk them through. So Hartnell's Doctor, we're going to cover what we're doing. And I'm still talking, I'm waffling, I know. We're going to be covering one of those seasons. Each one's a story that's considered a standout for each of the Doctors. That's the idea. So we're not doing the whole thing. We're just doing a story from each. So for Hartnell, the first Doctor, the Aztecs. Then we're going to be covering Doctor Who Invasion Earth 2152 from the Hammer series. Then for the Troughton Doctor, we're going to be covering the Macra Terror. For Sean Pertwee's Doctor, Inferno. For Baker #1, 4th Doctor, Genesis of the Daleks. For Davison, we're going to be covering Earthshock. For C. Baker, Colin Baker, Vengeance of Varos or Varos. and then for McCoy, the Seventh Doctor, Remembrance of the Daleks. So that's what we're going to be covering, and we're going to be covering each one of those stories. So go find them out. They are available in different places. I'm going to be covering them from BritBox, which has actually got, or had, I think in the new year, had a bit of a special offer on, so go check that out. But they're available on DVD and all of the sources. I'm sure you can go find them. So, Julian, what are your thoughts? Ready for Doctor Who?
Absolutely. Well, you and I are both Doctor Who fans.
Yeah.
So, this will be a treat. And there are ones in there that I haven't seen. I've probably seen a third or so of the original series. So, I'm excited to do 12 Monkeys and Gilliam, and then spend some time for Doctor Who. I mean, between that and Red Dwarf, we are nailing British sci-fi television.
Well, not just that. We've also done Quatermass. We've done so a pre-Doctor Who. So we've done Quatermass. Now we're doing the classic Doctor. So yeah, and I think one of the questions we will be answering at the end of that is, we'll keep it to ourselves for now, but between the who is our favourite Doctor, the classic era. We'll keep that under wraps for now, but we'll be addressing that. But yeah, so if you've enjoyed this season, and I hope you have, it's been a fantastic ride for us. Please let us know. You can find us, as Julian said, you can find us on Podtime Space on Twitter. Come find us, come say hello. Also come find our boss. We haven't really mentioned him today, but Tilaran Lem is also available on social media. He's been, what we're recording this just before Christmas, so he's been a bit quiet recently. He's trying to keep away from the Spider-Man spoilers. But yeah, he'll be very active. He's become more active. He's going to be providing some reviews for us, maybe some Doctor Who commentary. We shall see.
Have you noticed that when we don't refer to him in an episode, you get a headache that lasts for a week?
Yeah.
Is he doing that? Is he? I mean, is that just a coincidence? Or I mean,
I don't know, but it's sort of like the voice of the Mysteron. Sometimes in my dreams, I just have this voice saying sort of do this. So have you edited that yet? Yeah, I have, I promise. So he will be taking more part in things in 2022. So yeah, go find us, have a conversations, try and sort of go say hello, but also go find us on any platform, any podcast platform, and leave us a review. We're going to be going for some review drives this year, try and get some more sort of things out there.
Well, to that point, this is our 66th episode. And that's counting the Dune special that we put out. Most of these episodes are 2 hours. Well, whether you need 2 hours on all of these movies or not, a lot of time and a lot of love. And we love doing this, but a lot of time and a lot of love goes into doing this. So if you get a chance just to review it, let people know what it is that we're up to. Bless you. You're appreciated.
Yes, we really do. We really do appreciate it. And of course, the final thing, if you want to keep help us keep the lights on and keep us energizing Tilaran, please check out our Patreon. It's www.patreon.com/20cg media. That's 20cg media. And we've got different kinds of things on there. But more importantly, for anyone who's watching, listening to this, Julian and I have a weekly podcast called Trekking Through the Twilight Zone, in which part we talk about a different episode each week for 15 to 20 minutes. And we are rapidly wrapping up on season 1, and we're getting into season 2. So there is hours of Twilight goodness on there to go. Please go check it out, and that's available at the £5 level, entry level. But it shows your help, your support, and your dedication. So we appreciate it. Anyway,
that's like a cup of coffee, right?
It is.
Go to Starbucks.
Yeah, go. Yeah, that's it. So instead of buying that cup of coffee, go and dedicate some money to us, and you will get hours of content, some fantastic content on there. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this season, and Julian, thank you for joining us on this season. It's been absolutely awesome as always.
Thank you. I love hearing your perspective, even when it's dead wrong about the fountain. And I never point out that it is embarrassing. But no, I always learn so much, and we come at things differently, but it helps me to understand. Like that conversation about the fountain and the man who fell to earth is fascinating. Even about just how do you approach a movie? How do you rate a movie? How do you compare movies?
Yeah, well, I refer to this as an experiment, and I feel that this is because it's a learning experiment for me, like all the time, and I think hopefully the audience is seeing that we're developing, and this is getting on more and more, and we'll develop more in season 4. So anyway, we shall let everyone get back to whatever they're doing. So stay safe. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.